right, my dearest friends, thinkers, and gamers. My goodness, it has been a minute, hasn't it? Let me first and foremost, since the year has turned in my absence, wish you all a happy new year. A couple of weeks late. I hope you've been having a great 2024 so far. It's crazy that we're already halfway through the first month of it, but that's time for you, isn't it? I'm Aaron Suduko, your host for Tales of Praxis and the founder of WithATerribleFate.com, your first and final source for all literary studies of video games, coming at you from the other end of I guess about 2.5 week hiatus, and really a bit of a longer, digression's not quite the right word, but change of our MO than that, because you might remember before we took our little vacation, we had a few illustrious guest stars, my wonderful friends and colleagues, Matt McGill and Dan Hughes, which were spectacular for adding some different texture to the stream, but certainly it has been a while since it's been just you and me. So welcome back to something more intimate. I think everyone on here probably knows, but for the benefit of those who don't, we're coming off of this little vacation because Dan and I were in Japan for his bachelor party for a couple of weeks. And so if I seem a little bit frazzled, the tech setup notwithstanding, it's probably because I'm getting over the jet lag and insanity of that. I got in all of 2 days ago, and I've been to the airport, I think 3 times since then, counting my return trip, because wouldn't you know it, I came home and then I drove Dan to the airport, which I was happy to do. But then I had to make an extra trip because Air Canada lost our bags with everything we got in Japan inside of them. And thankfully they were found relatively quickly, and it's not worth going through the whole insane story of our travel back. But suffice it to say, it was like wandering through all of the circles of hell on your way back from paradise to earth. Truly, every part of the trip was great except for the return trip, which was nuts. But I was able to pick up my bags and everything in them, which will make for some good show and tell, as I was alluding to. Grail, hello. Random child, nice to see you too. Yeah, pottery, I guess this is a fairly standard route. It was the most efficient one for us, because Dan and I, we were looking at possible flights for various combinations of our going through Texas, where he lives, or Denver, where I live. And the most efficient one, for whatever reason, was a shot up to Vancouver and then across to Japan with something like a 1 hour layover in between. So we did that both on the way to and back. And Air Canada was great right up until the return trip, which I guess is to say they were great on the way out, but I don't know if I would use them again after the way back, to be honest with you. Yeah, the silly weather definitely didn't help anything. There's no doubt about that. I know, I should have reached out to you. I thought about it. It was a very nice airport. I was saying to Dan, between Vancouver's airport and the airport in Tokyo, we were treated to some really exceptionally nice airport experiences, especially coming from the States, where my feeling at least is that that is far from the norm. Dear friends, well, if you are newcomers to the stream or simply need a reminder after our time off, Tales of Praxis is an analytical study series that I've been running for coming on a year and a couple months, if you can believe that, for With a Terrible Fate. It's focused just on Bandai Namco's incredible series of JRPGs, the Tales or Tales of series. A collection of masterpiece stories, games, everything in between that made a big impact on me personally as a gamer and a person growing up, as was the case for so many others. So now, as a philosopher of games, working on the study and appreciation of their storytelling in the field, I wanted to go back and revisit those games and ask, well, what is it about these that are so formative to so many of us as we're growing up? How have they impacted gaming and storytelling even beyond the context of their own series? And how can we come to appreciate what they're trying to say better by looking at them all in conversation with one another and trying to develop a language for the themes that they're concerned with and how they address them. If I'm also seeming a little frazzled beyond the jet lag, especially on this first stream adventure where we get reoriented in Tales of Grace's F, it's because in the broader context of the series, I'm also excited to work on a bit of a shorter piece to get back into the string of the written publications with Tales of Fantasia. So that's running circles in my head. And as I also tweeted about, I had the distinct pleasure of starting Tales of Hearts. Is that the term for the remastered one that we got? I think it's Tales of Hearts R, on the plane out to Japan and then back from Japan, which I've also been loving. I have a million thoughts, but so yes, I'm juggling a few Tales games in my head, which is the best plug I can make for the whole context of this series. So if you're just stumbling upon the stream or the VODs, I guess sort of the front-facing aspect of Tales of Praxis, which I've come to love so much for all of you as much as my own work on the series, is this sequence of live book clubs, if you want to think of it that way. I'm also fond of calling it the real live JRPG party because everyone parties up in the chat. And as is the case in the party of a JRPG, we all bring our own perspectives and views to what makes these games so special. And we try to uncover various layers of their meaning in real time on Twitch 3 times a week. We're going to be keeping the same schedule for now, 7 p.m. Eastern on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We'll see if we want to crank things up or shift things around going forward into the new year. And then the other horn of the series consists of my written analytical articles studying some of the themes and aspects of the series storytelling in a bit more depth. You can find all of those on withtheterriblefate.com. So we have a wealth already that I encourage you to check out. But yes, that Tales of Fantasia little piece was my teaser to let you know that, especially on the back of this Japan trip, I have a lot of ideas brewing, excited to share them with you. The other thing that I got done in Japan, in between all of the fun and adventures I was having with Dan, were all but the very final one of my grad school applications. So that is, for all intents and purposes, off my plate now. And we are turning back towards Tales of Praxis and other With a Terrible Fate activities with gusto. So 2024 is going to be a good time to be a gamer, but especially With a Terrible Fate or Praxis gamer, thinker, whatever you want to call it, especially because actually even some of you on the stream might not be familiar with this, familiar with a Terrible Fate enough to know this, but coming up in November will be, if you can believe it, the 10-year anniversary of With a Terrible Fate. It'll have been a full decade since I was in my undergraduate studies, just starting off with philosophy, and Nintendo announced their remake of Majora's Mask. And I said to myself, you know, there's more to that game and the artistic value of it than a lot of people realize. I'm going to sit down and try to figure that out. And the rest, as they say, is history. We've been blessed with many thoughtful analysts on the site, and various sorts of collaborators and community members in the years since then. And so I'm not going to make any promises between now and then, except to say I have my thinking cap on in terms of ways to mark the occasion. And I'm feeling really humbled that we're still around after that amount of time. And it's only full steam ahead. Lots more of ideas and plans in the hopper for you. So look forward to that too, my friends. Yeah, I feel like the weather has been crazy everywhere, Grail. I came back to the coldest weather Colorado has had, I think, all year. It was something like minus 15 Fahrenheit on the drive home, which is that sweet spot for horribly cold weather where my poor dog Evie, whom I missed very much and is fine and was delighted to see me, can't even really walk outside because it's too cold and her paws freeze. So thankfully, knock on wood, that weather seems to be gone as of today. But yeah, I believe the world is coming to the end and burning to the ground. Yeah, if I had to be grounded anywhere, Pottery, Vancouver's airport seemed like not one of the worst airports. No doubt about that. Yes, the R is in the title. That's going to be a good way for me to remember that going forward. Okay, I'll give you very brief thoughts on Tales of R, Grail, just since you asked, and I know you've been pushing it for a while, and I know we have a lot to dive into today, so I'll try to keep this brief, and I'm sure we'll have plenty more opportunities to talk about it in the future. I will say very briefly and succinctly, I love it. I think it's delightfully weird and challenging for me since I always play the dub of the Tales games first, and that's sort of how I'm accustomed to easing my way into the games, to have a game that we only got the sub for. I didn't realize that was the case, and so that makes things feel very different to me in an interesting way. I think I've said before on the stream, I'm a huge fan of Ni no Kuni. I've published about it on With a Terrible Fate if you want to see my more involved thoughts, but everything that especially the first of those two games works out and works through deeply resonates with my concerns in the world of gaming and storytelling. And I feel a ton of Ni no Kuni in Tales of Hearts, which I'm really loving. And so thus far, I'm kind of going into it through the lens of saying, okay, this kind of feels like a Tales take on Ni no Kuni. Let's see what it has to say and how it plays with those ideas, which has been really fun and rewarding. Without spoilers, but just for your benefit, Grail, where I'm at in the story is we are just arriving at the capital of the Empire for the first time. So I'm sure a decent amount of the way to go, but enough of the way in, I think, to have a feel for what they're playing with and what they're thinking about. The combat system, I love. I think it might be my favorite, if not like certainly top 3 for Tales combat systems. Just the way in which it combines, for me, what is an intuitive art style with an intuitive combo-centric gameplay mechanic, to even combining and weaving in some of the warp strike mechanics of something like what you get in Dream Drop Distance or Final Fantasy 15. There's the kind of variety that we've extolled in the combat of Tales of Vesperia, but for me, in the way that I approach a lot of combat in gaming, it just kind of clicks that much more, which has been very, very fun. I've almost found myself saying, man, I wish I had a PS TV to be able to play it on the big screen, because this game feels like it deserves more than the Vita, although I have been having a lot of fun getting to know the Vita through the experience of playing this. The characters are super interesting. I think the character development system, in terms of the different virtues according to which you can level them up, again, feels very Ni no Kuni, feels very concerned with a lot of the other themes of what it is to become a person that we've wrestled with in the Tales games thus far. And of course, without going into too many plot spoilers, but Grail, you'll know what I'm talking about, seeing a lot of really interesting connective tissue with characters like Sophie and Colette, especially Colette, but even Nazamil in the way that we were talking about in Beyond the Dawn just a couple short months ago. So I'm really excited to see where that all goes as we push forward. That's right. This time it was genuinely not even a little bit your fault, Pottery. Well, you know, it's been a while. I want everyone to feel welcome coming back, so I'm happy to eat some of the L's. I'll be eating the Xenoblade one in a couple minutes too, so stay tuned for that, but put a pin in it. Yes, I found myself laughing and remembering everything that we were talking about in terms of the strategy menu, even for Tales of Grace's Grail, because, like, oh my goodness, if you thought that was sophisticated, Hearts really cranks it up to 11 doesn't even do it justice. I want to say, like, it cranks it up to 21. Like, oh my God, I feel like it gives you enough strategy options to do anything you want to in battle with precision, but oh my goodness, it breaks my head to figure that out. I will say, though, selfishly, it's been one that I've been happy to work through off the stream, because I feel like that is part of what's given me the mental headspace and grace, no pun intended, to work through all the different very complicated systems charitably, rather than just being frustrated and shaking my head and saying I'm not going to bother with this, which is more of a me thing than a stream thing. But hey, it's a new year. We're becoming more of Tales of Praxis veterans. I'm sure we will be continuing to become more comfortable with working things through live on stream as well. I have no doubt about that. So what else can I tease for you, fine friends? Tales of Fantasia coming up. I really do think that'll be a short meditation, because without giving too much away, I actually want to focus on a particular kind of absence in the game, something that they don't do, which I think for me, especially having replayed it, stands as one of the most significant and like humanly impactful things, especially as one gets older, that really makes Fantasia work in a distinctive way for me. It's something I haven't seen a lot of people talking about, at least in the discourse that I've been able to find. So if nothing else, I'll be interested just to send out something a little tighter and more contemplative into the world, so we can have an opportunity to talk about this together. But then the bigger thing down the pike, which I teased on Twitter also, and the more I've been thinking about it, the more I feel like there's probably enough there to be thinking about it, is I'll say a little bit more than what I teased, just to get the chat thinking about it. So what I said was, you know, I'm kind of contemplating this crazy idea of putting together a study that might combine Future Redeemed, and there we can hit the reset timer on Xenoblade Chronicles. That's not even the reason I was thinking that we'd have to reset it, but there you go. And Tears of the Kingdom, and 2 Tales games that I haven't talked about yet, but I'm worried that might be taking on too much. I don't think it will be taking on too much. I think it'll be a fun comparative study that will hopefully be at least a little bit tighter than what I put together for Vesperia and Destiny, though that was certainly fun in its own right. But as I kind of alluded to at the conclusion to Act 3 for Tales of Grace's F, and as you probably know about me if you're familiar with some of my other work, because this is certainly a through line in it, I'm really interested in the ways in which stories across the history of gaming tell different stories about an avatar as an avatar, which is to say, given the fact that some of these characters have this special relationship to us as players, and we can cause them to make decisions and take different actions in the world in these special ways that render them different from NPCs or other characters, what are different ways of telling that kind of avatar-focused stories? Do you need to break the fourth wall and really aggressively point out in the story that the avatar is an avatar in order to say anything interesting about that relationship? Or can you do it in more subtle ways? And I think this year, well, especially reflecting on last year, I guess at this point, is an interesting time to be thinking about that, because in Future Redeemed and in Tears of the Kingdom, without giving any spoilers away for the plot, if you played them, then you know that they do both explicitly call out by name the idea of an avatar and what it is for an entity within the world to act as an avatar for something other than itself, in ways which I would say offer some pretty unique dynamics to their story, but also do so very explicitly, like I was saying. I'm interested in standing up a certain kind of comparative study looking at that mode of storytelling against something like what we get in Tales of Grace's F, and without spoilers, because I really want to talk about it and do it justice for those who haven't played it, and you really should play it if you haven't yet, Tales of Eternia, because both of those games, I think, do some pretty interestingly similar things in terms of talking about what it is for someone to be an avatar, but not by calling anything out explicitly as an avatar. So you might remember one of the things that I was really mulling on and pushing Dan to think about at the end of Act 3 was this idea that, as Asbel was saying to Lambda, let me take you inside of myself and show you the world. What he was saying without really naming the thing was, let me be an avatar for you. Let me show you around this world and cohabitate with you and allow you to embody me in a certain sense, not dissimilar to what it is that the player has been doing with me throughout the rest of the story. So especially since all four of those games, in my estimation, are some of the most thoughtful and emotionally impactful stories that gaming have told in a while, I think it'll be really interesting to tease apart how do they play with those dynamics in slightly different ways, and what insight can that give us into their individual stories and messages, and what is it they're thinking about, and what we as players can take from them. So it'll be a bit of a larger project than the Tales of Fantasia one, but hopefully at least a little bit smaller than Dimlos and De Nomos, at least as long as there aren't any magic swords involved, because you know me and magic swords. But oh my goodness, between Zelda and Xenoblade and Tales, odds are good there'll be some magic swords in there anyway, but we'll see how that rolls, and we'll roll onward from there. I know, pottery. Well, I think I said this the last time you mentioned it to me, but actually, even as I was working through my writing sample, a friend and colleague of mine, Nate Randall, he was looking at it and some of the themes that I was talking about and the arguments that I was making against Nguyen's monograph, Games Agency as Art. And Nate said to me, man, you know, Baldur's Gate is really good for some of the examples of things that you're thinking about. So all I can say is trust that it is high on my list, but especially with Hearts on my plate now, I'm putting the shoulder to the wheel in terms of trying to at least play through all of the Tales games, so that then we can talk about all the Tales games, and then Aaron can be justified in playing other things. So hopefully it won't be too long, and that's the best that I can say about that. What did you have to say about Hearts, Grail? Yeah, I no argument from me in terms of it being very directly a character study. I think that's kind of what I was alluding to, and I was saying it's a really interesting take for me in terms of this idea of what is it to be a person and to develop into a person, which of course is something you get in so many JRPGs and so many Tales games, Tales of the Abyss being top of mind for me, but through that kind of specific mechanically complemented lens that you're talking about. So yes, I'm very excited to chat more about that as we get into it. We'll have to figure out some way to do that while being generous with spoiler warnings, because I don't want to ruin it for people who haven't played it. But similar to what I've been saying with Tales of Eternia, I want to kind of slyly bully people into playing it, because as with so many kind of underrepresented works in a series, I think some of the sleeper hits are oftentimes some of the most insightful and challenging ones. So I'll be excited to see if that ends up being the case with Hearts as well. Oh wow, so you've tried a bunch of stuff, Grail. That's awesome. What did you think of Cyberpunk and Baldur's Gate? And Astral Ascent, I haven't even heard of that. Astral Chain is one that's been on my list forever because I think it was what Platinum did right after Nier Automata, and Yoko Taro like went to bat advocating for it, saying like this is really good, you should play it, which is all the endorsement that I need. But it probably has nothing to do with the game you're talking about. Just you say Astral, and that's the first thing that comes to my mind. And I'm telling you, I think what's going to be next on our list. I mean, I know we're still working through Act 4 of Graces, but I think it's safe to say next we should do Zillia and Zillia 2, because at that point, like I'm working through Hearts, and the only other remaining mothership title I'll have for this whole Tales of Praxis adventure will be Legendia. So I figure it'll be good for me to work through that on my own. And then especially since I haven't done Zillia or Zillia 2 ever, and since I know there's such ardent passion for it on the stream, we can work through those together. And then we can always turn our attention to playing through some of the other ones, which I've already played for Praxis after that. But that way we'll have the whole unit of games worked through and fresh in Aaron's head, which I think will open up the aperture for a bunch more fun kinds of analysis going on from there. So all that to say, good time to be getting reinterested in that. Stay tuned. And yes, especially walking around in Japan and being with Dan, who's a huge Persona head, I'll tell you, I've got an inkling that I'll probably be playing through the Persona series sooner rather than later as well. Always too many games to play, right? But I think that's high on my list too. I'll give a fun shout out because I don't think I tweeted about this, but one of the many stops we made in Japan was to the actual physical cafe that Cafe LeBlanc was based on in Persona 5. Let me tell you, awesome atmosphere, and also one of the best cafes we visited in Japan, just in terms of the quality of their coffee and sweets and everything. Rain on the Roof is the name of the actual location if you want to look it up. And if you ever find yourself wandering in Japan, whether you're a Persona fan or not, make a point to go there. It's really great. That's my the first of my many Japan promotions, I'm sure. Yeah, I feel, well, just for the reasons that I said, Pottery, I feel like that's a prudent plan. But as you know, and as I've said before, I'm happy to keep the live book club studies going for as long as we want until we've played through all of the ones that we can play through together, because it is such a different experience than working through it on your own. So that's certainly not to the exclusion of anything else. I Random child, look, if you can get me into Minecraft, I will be forever grateful to you, because I think I've said this on our adventures here before, but it's one of those games where, especially given my love for Legos, I've always felt as if I ought to be able to get into it. But I think just because I so thoroughly approach video games as works of storytelling, it's hard for me to get into that kind of game which isn't story forward, if that makes sense. Okay, Cyberpunk feels fun. That's what I've heard about it too. I just heard that it got released way too early, which is not an uncommon problem these days, as I'm sure we all know. But you've been sharing the big TV. I get that. That's a constant struggle. Be as murdery as possible. It's always a good way to test and see what you can break for the system. Well, and you know, I think I've said this before, Grail, but one of the things that I feel really blessed about with the Tales of Praxis series is being able to just write and work on some of the games that not that many people have talked about. Like I was saying with, what I'm gearing up for with Tales of Fantasia, I felt that way with Destiny also. So I think I've made this call before, but if any of you, over the course of our live book club adventures, find particular games or moments in games or stuff that you'd love to talk about and dig into more, and I know we've already called out a bunch of them over the course of our adventures together, but if there are particular things where you just feel like, man, there's something worth exploring here and no one ever talks about them, feel free to let me know. That's part of the fun thing about the interactivity of all this. I will certainly be happy to steer my work in that direction for the sake of starting those conversations. All right, friendos. Well, we will keep chatting as we go forward here, but especially since we're at the half-hour mark already, and I do want to get back into Tales of Grace's F. What I wanted to start with before that was just a little bit of show and tell. So I'm sure this will shock you to hear. I got way too many things and brought home way too many things with me in Japan, which was part of why I'm so relieved that they found my luggage and why I almost had a heart attack when they said they lost it. So it's way too much to go through in one night. But what I figured I would do is I would curate a few selections over the next few streams until we kind of get bored of it. And I can show you and even unbox some stuff, which I've never really been one for unboxing videos, but I figured since we've gotten to know each other a bit in this Tales of Praxis adventure together, it might be fun to open some things, especially some Tales related things maybe for the first time, and see what it's all about. And we can go from there. So I have 3 offerings for you before we get back into Tales of Graces. 2 are Tales things which before going to Japan, I didn't know existed, which is one of my favorite things to stumble upon. That was what happened the last time I was in Japan with the wonderful, I think it was the 10th anniversary of Tales soundtrack, this black box they put out that included, beyond a great selection of music, one of my favorite little pin sets highlighting different characters, which I still wear. So I found 2 things like that, which I'll share with you, and one thing that is not Tales related, but especially if you know me and you've been following the stream, I couldn't not share this with you right away. So the first thing I didn't know existed for Tales until I got to Japan this time and stumbled upon it in a random hole-in-the-wall shop in Akihabara, a 20th anniversary sound box for Tales of Fantasia. Oh, that's hilarious. It's a green box. So let me see if I can I toggle my green screen off easily? That's so funny. Is the inside at least not green? Let me just turn it off. Oh no. What are we doing? Okay. There. I turned it off briefly. Oh, that's so funny. The one thing I didn't prepare for going into this stream. All right, well, there. It's worth it for the box because it's a gorgeous matte green that goes so well with especially at least the GBA release that we got. I don't have the other covers vivid in my mind, but the little sketched outlines of Pegasus. I think the horse is Pegasus, and Archie and Mint and Cress hanging out as in one of the iconic covers that we got. I know, it's not even the same shade. You'd think it would be better about that. But so the fun thing about this is, talk about an homage to Motoi Sakuraba. It has the full soundtracks for literally all 3 of the releases that were made for Tales of Fantasia. So you've got the Super Famicom, the PS version, and the GBA version all in here. And this is me opening it for the first time. I didn't do it before the stream. Oh, look at that. So right away, this is why unboxings are fun. You have the Edward Morrison quote on the inside cover. If there is evil in this world, it lurks in the hearts of men. And another great color, really pop illustration of Cress and Archie and Mint. This is what I love about just buying things sight unseen in the Tales series. They always delight with just the packaging and the artwork. A great action shot of them taking on one of Douse's minions on the inside cover. How about that? With the first of 6 discs. And then a bunch of stylized discs with all the different characters on them hanging out here. Looks like there's some stuff hiding in the back too. Oh, there are a bunch of quotes, and I don't even know how to get to the other disc in the back. Oh, I think it pops out. Maybe? Oh, there. Okay. Oh my goodness, there are so many discs. Oh! And this one I think is just Douse with the winky face, which is hilarious. Oh, so there are a bunch of different shots of, I think, here, it's going to be so confusing to put this back together, but it's worth it. So I think the way this works is the 3 sections are separated by the version of the game, and then you get a bunch of screenshots from that particular version on the back. Isn't that so cool? Oh, and you have yet another cool illustration on the back cover of the Mana Seed, which, spoilers for Tales of Fantasia, they actually give to Darius Carlon to basically honor Douse's wish at the end of the game, which is one of the other things that people don't really talk about enough with Tales of Phantasia, but makes it so interesting. And so then you have 3 quotes at the bottom, one for each of the versions, which also, as I'm looking at it, also all the versions have the different like title stylations at the top, which is great. So you have the pulse of destiny beats through the earth, and then turning tears of sorrow into a sword, the boy now runs past the time. Great for a time travel game, especially that kind of time travel game. And then finally, everything started here. It kind of makes me think that the third section is the last one, but I guess also Tales of Phantasia does kind of start in the future relative to a lot of the games, so maybe they're just toying with me. All right, I'll put this back together. I love that. See? And it's great because, like, I love being able to share that with you Praxis gamers and Tales heads, because I feel like if I tried to explain to someone who wasn't familiar with the Tales series, oh yeah, I went to Japan and I bought this special box that has 3 copies of the same game soundtrack inside it, they would look at me like I was nuts. But I feel like, you know, here among friends and understanding the value and the storytelling of the series and how much they put into all of these versions and how much we've talked about the different versions of these games over the course of Tales of Praxis together, we can really appreciate why that is so special and why the soundtrack itself can be like a work of art. If I can pop this damn thing back in. There we go. All right. Put that away real quick. But it's funny that you ask that, Grail, because usually the way this... I got a bunch of soundtracks while I was in Japan, so I'm sure I'll show some more of them before all is said and done. But, you know, like I stumbled across all of the Xenoblade Chronicles soundtrack. I found the soundtrack for Final Fantasy IX, which I absolutely love. And usually how it works is I will oftentimes use a lot of them for... you know, when I'm working as background music or when I'm exercising or stuff like that. So I get a decent amount of use out of them. Usually I like to sit and listen to them once just in a kind of appreciator stance to like think through things like, you know, in the case of Tales of Phantasia, what the different versions sound like and what that might mean for the different games. But then oftentimes after that, what'll happen is, as with most music, I guess, I'll curate sort of a tighter list of the songs that I want to use for playlists of different kinds, which won't include every single song, but especially for games with such diverse soundtracks, you know, in a given Tales game, you'll have great battle music, great quiet contemplative music. It's nice just to have kind of a single high quality source of all of those tracks so that you then can pick and choose the ones that you want for different occasions, you know? All right, so that was thing 1. Thing 2, to take a quick break from Tales, this was something I did know existed, but I never pulled the trigger to buy off eBay or something before, and then I found it in a store and it was like it was waiting for me on a used shelf, so I simply had to get it. The collector's edition of Xenoblade Chronicles 2, a little game which, if you know me and you're familiar with my work or with The Terrible Fate at all, you know holds a lot of special resonance for me. Kind of the further out I get from my publication on it, the more I think that working through my ideas of how Plato's philosophy relates to the story of this game kind of marked a transition in with A Terrible Fate in terms of why and how I was doing the analysis and interpretation of games that I continue to do to this day. And there are probably a few more key transition points in there, but this was a big one. And it's simply such a beautiful game that I love and do return to all the time, which boasts, I would say, one of the best, at least top 10, maybe top 5 video game soundtracks that I've ever heard. I simply love this soundtrack to death. And the box is so beautiful that I couldn't not buy it. What do we have in here? Looks like we have some postcards, a classic JRPG Collector's Edition addendum. Let's see which ones we get, though. I'm always curious to see which particular moments from the game they highlight. Plastic coating, my ultimate adversary. So the cover shot. Oh, and we have a bunch of nice character shots. That's nice. So you got Rex and Pyra and he who shall not be named, which is, of course, to say Mallows. The poor, sad Mallows. Poppy. And Tora. The most tragic antagonist of all time, our boy Jin. If you know, you know. Nia. A single unique blade, whose name I'm actually blanking on. I was going to be impressed with myself for getting through all of the names, but I'm sure, Grail, that seems like a thing you might know off the top of your head. Because I can picture that Blade's VA in the game, but I can't put my finger on his name. And then that wonderful art that graces the cover of the box. Huh, no pun intended, since we're going to be playing Graces. And got the game, of course. Yeah, a funny choice. Certainly not one of the more iconic blades from the game. I wonder what the thinking was there. Maybe the artist was someone special to the development team because they were all illustrated by different folks. A beautiful steelbook case, which as I'm gradually building out in spite of myself a steelbook collection. I'm glad to have that, I will admit. And then I think there's something hiding in the back, probably an art book. Ah, yes, Xenoblade 2 Collected Works. With a beautiful cover of a litany of ships. Look at that. Amazing. Well, I think I'm going to have to get more shelf space to display all of these wonders, but never a poor excuse to go back to Xenoblade, I'll tell you that much. I'll deal with that later. Okay, so we got that. And then don't worry, kiddos. I saved the best for last, and then we're going to soldier on to Graces. So this was something where, like I said, at least to the best of my memory, I didn't know this existed until I saw it. And it was after a full day of going around and adventuring through Tokyo, exploring Aki and a few other places, going through a bunch of shops. I was feeling really gassed. It was probably like at least 8 or 9 in the evening, and it was one of our first, if not our first days there, so I was quite tired and ready to crash. But Dan, bless his heart, if there's a retro game shop in a 5-mile radius, he's going to walk to it, and I'm going to go with him. So we walked into this one, and I was looking around, and I was doing this thing where I was browsing pretty tightly through the names of just all of the individual games on the shelves, because I was looking for a copy of the original Tales of Fantasia, because I thought that would be nice to add to the collection. And sadly, I wasn't able to find that. But then yeah, well, and so that's why our days were so long in Japan, Pottery, because in Japan it's a foregone conclusion, especially in Akihabara, that there's going to be one, forget about every 5 miles, every 5 feet. So it was a lot of stop and go, which was part of the fun of it. But so I was looking through all the shelves, and then I'm giving up on Fantasia, and so I kind of expand my gaze a bit and look around more broadly. And what do I see? But this thing that looked like it must have been waiting for me, Tales of Eternia. And in fact, so you might know, if you're good on your Tales history, that this was the third Tales game, the third mothership title, that is, to be released after Fantasia and Destiny. What I didn't know, but which makes sense if you think about it, was that this was also actually the first collector's edition ever that they put out. And for being the third title in a pretty young series, when collector's editions were still, certainly not the norm in gaming at that point, Dan and I were talking, and we found ourselves thinking, man, it's pretty special and unusual that they put a flag in the ground and started doing that so early. So I've been vamping and getting the hype train going since I played Tales of Eternia for the first time, that this is such a special game. Every Tales fan, really every JRPG fan or story fan, owes it to herself to play this. So I hope you find a way to at some point. I'm definitely going to be gunning for turning your mind around to really prioritizing it in that analysis that I have teed up after the Tales of Fantasia one. But it is so special. And I didn't realize what a big game it was in Japan, but here's another funny little micro story of our Japan travels. So on the way out of the country, before all of the crazy shenanigans with flights, when we were in the Tokyo airport, this news crew came up to us, this Asahi news crew, and they said, hey, we like to talk with tourists coming out of the country. Do you have a few minutes before your flight? for an interview segment with us, talking about some of the things you did and got in Japan. And it was like the only time in travel history, for me at least, that we had gotten to an airport hours and hours ahead of our flight just to be on the super safe side. So we said, yeah, we'll do that. And so we were showing them some of the things we got, talking about our travels, Dan's history as a Japanese scholar, my work in the philosophy of gaming, stuff like that. And Dan had gotten a bunch of classic Pokemon games for themselves. So they were losing their minds over that. And then I took out this, and the interviewer said, oh man, like this is a really famous game in Japan. And he pointed to Keel on this side of the box. He said, yeah, I don't even know the series, but like I recognize that character from around, which was nuts because I had always, obviously, I mean, if you know the history of Tales and what has and has not come out of Japan, you can intuit that it's bigger in Japan than it is in the States. But it really does have like a known presence there in a way that feels very foreign and very affirming if you're a fan from the States or elsewhere outside of Japan coming into a culture that really gets it and appreciates it. I know. I kind of had that thought too, Grail. I was like, okay, like you recognize Keel and not Reed, but I mean, again, if you know, you know, like that, you could weave a funny joke or at least anecdote about what that says about the game, that someone would recognize Keel and not Reed. But we'll have plenty to riff on once I've published on it. There's no doubt about that. Yeah, well, and thank you, Pottery, because that is the best segue I could possibly ask for the opening of this box, because I haven't opened it, but I looked up what was in it, and I think actually, speaking of figures and maybe why it may well have been a thing in Japan before it got over to the States, I think we have some figures to look forward to here, among many other very cool goodies. So, yep. Oh, look at this. It's so cool. It's a bunch of figures and a keychain also that says Tales of Eternia on it. But you have the whole main cast there. Look at that. Our main boy, the world or at least nationally famous Keel. And then, of course, Farah and Reed and Meredy and Quickie. And, oh, you'll love this. If you didn't get enough of Quickie just from that little figure, don't worry. They also included a Quickie battery-powered clock. So if you don't think that Aaron's about to make that into his bedtime alarm clock, you don't know me very well. Honestly, only makes me wish that they had more of that stuff for characters like Rapide and Hootle and the like. But I'm a big diehard Quickie fan, so I'm certainly not going to complain about that. Another of the many cases in which Japan gets a much more beautiful and telling title illustration than what we got. Not that I'm bitter about the one that we got for Tales of Eternia, but this art is just better. I think we can all agree. And I think the rest is just padding. Yeah, it feels that way. Oh, but there's something way down at the bottom, of course. So let's open that real quick. I know. Well, you know what I think it is, Pottery? Because I was talking about this with Dan because we encountered this more than once while we were over here. And what he said, I mean, tell me what you think about this, but it felt right to me. He said, you know, I feel like Japanese companies, they feel like for the international releases and especially the releases to the Western world, they think that the consumers want something that's more streamlined and sleek and simple than the Japanese style art, which sometimes will translate into the Japanese art being just really colorful with a lot more characters and a lot more emotion, whereas we'll get something that's like much more pared down or simpler, or sometimes even just a symbol rather than a tableau of the characters in the versions that we get. I think this must be an art book. But again, talk about big color illustrations of the characters. It's the same picture, but I mean, big. Oh yeah, and just a bunch of beautiful illustrations. The centerfold. If you don't cry immediately, you haven't played this game and you need to, and that's all I'm going to say about that for risk of spoilers. Action and conflict. Yeah, and that's a great way of putting it for Tales of Eternia, because I don't have my North America box on me, but that's exactly what it is. It's just like a very generic action shot of Reed and Farah as opposed to the whole cast, which says, I think, exactly what it is that you're saying. All right. I don't know if I'll ever be able to put this box together again. Maybe, maybe. Oh, that wasn't so hard. Yeah, I was joking with myself that I got all of these things from Japan, which I think have required me, now that I'm back home, to buy at least 2 other things just to support these purchases. One is a whole other bookcase to display all of these wonderful things, which I'm sure I will treasure for the rest of my gaming days. And then the other is a proper temperature-controlled kettle, because one of the other things that was so much fun and so rewarding that we did, and I think this will be my last Japan story for the moment, and then we'll get into Tales of Graces, was we went to a traditional Japanese tea ceremony, which was so cool. If you've never seen one or you don't know what that means, I encourage you to look it up. But to make a very long story short, part of specifically the Zen practice of Buddhism that's native to Japan, that was developed, I think, in the last like 400 years, so relatively recent, was the use of tea, and especially matcha, the kind of green tea that's made from the youngest tea leaves, as a practice, a medicinal practice, to facilitate discipline among Zen monks as they were focused on concentrating and doing basically hardcore meditation and needed to maintain their awareness for just hours and hours on end. So a bunch of ceremony and very precise ritual around the pouring and consumption of tea came about in connection with this practice. And so nowadays, I mean, it's taught and practiced all over the world. You can probably find a place that does it near you if you're interested. But we made this adventure to basically the global center of matcha development in the world, Uji. And was it in Uji? I think it was just outside of there, actually, by like one of the foremost Zen temples in Japan, that we were able to actually sit for one of these Japanese tea ceremonies with this amazing practitioner who explained, didn't just serve us the tea and do the ceremony, but explained to us all of the meaning and history behind it, which is why I'm able to tell you this now. But so, as I think I've explained more than once on the stream before, I'm a huge coffee nerd. I'm more of a fair weather tea nerd, but matcha has so many cool health benefits, and it hits in a very different way than coffee does, for me at least, in terms of the way in which it keys you into your surroundings and your awareness of the world. Like you drink it and you understand why it was developed by monks for that purpose. So I got a whole matcha kit to try to work that into my daily routine, but I don't have a good kettle for it, so got to get that too. I know there's a whole little like cultural narrative and commentary on Tales of Eternia that we could do just off of that observation, Grail. So put a pin in that. I have to believe we will probably come back to it before all is said and done. All right, so let's see. Last things last, if I can get my chroma key back and working. Good. Oh, that actually was not nearly as painful as I feared it might be. Good. All right, friends. Well, Grail, I think you're the keeper of the records for how long it takes before we actually get into a game. Was that the new record? I feel like coming back after a multi-week break and having so many stories about Japan put us in a good standing to overturn the last record, but I don't remember what the last record was. In either event, I think we're now well situated to get back into the F arc of Tales of Graces. Oh man, so we were close. I should have kept vamping on Japan for slightly longer, but that's all right. Like I said, you have to remember, like in the grand scheme of things, we'll certainly beat the old record, because I only just gave you a little teaser of the many adventures and things I brought back from Japan. So stay tuned. We'll have plenty more to cover in the next few of our adventures together. Thank you. I had put that on my list and had promptly forgotten to check that, so that fixed things right away. Make sure it's stuck. Excellent. Good. Well, I figured I was going to do this on my own, but since we've all taken a break from this for a couple weeks, it occurred to me that it would be nice to just visit the synopsis, since it's there for us. And thankfully, we'd only had one adventure into the F arc before we called our break. So I figured we could just revisit the little bit of exposition we've gotten since then, and then we'll dive back in and see what the rest of the F arc holds for us. I'm excited. I was really, the more that reveal of Lambda being present within Asbel and helping him was sitting with me, the more I just got really stoked, frankly, to see what happens next, especially since the way in which that relationship is manifesting is as a new mechanic in the game. That's very cool. All right, so let's dive in here, folks. Sophie's distress. In the half a year since peace returned to the world, Asbel had been working hard at his lordly duties. But Sophie, who lived with him, had suddenly become inconsolable over the fact that Asbel and her other friends would eventually die and leave her alone in the world. At around the same time, Asbel began receiving reports of monster attacks from a number of different locations. Despite his concerns about Sophie's abrupt disappearance, Asbel agreed to travel to Verona at Richard's request. And of course, implicit in that was the mystery woman who showed up before Sophie, whom only she was able to see, and basically prompted her to consider, what are you going to do when everyone around you has died and you're still around? And the monster reports, so far as we know, are kind of at least somewhat related to the aftershocks of Lambda and all of the monsters that emanated from him, which is why Richard feels partly responsible and obligated to deal with them. Upon arriving in Verona, Asbel reunited with Richard, Sharia, Malik, and Hubert. With the thought of possible marriage on his mind, Asbel couldn't look Sharia in the face. Hubert and Malik confirmed that the increase in monster attacks was not confined to Windor. Suspecting that the attacks might be connected to a nest being built by monsters in the ruins beneath Gloandi, Asbel and the others decided to travel to said ruins via the Verona catacombs. And of course, this also, the marriage plot, besides being interesting to think about in the wake of Beyond the Dawn and in relation to all the themes of Tales of Graces and all those other highbrow things, it also gave me maybe my second favorite Jamieson Price reading of all time as of now. No, at least third, but Sharia, let's make out, which might have been my highlight from the first adventure of ours in the F arc. In the ruins beneath Gloandi, Asbel and his companions encountered powerful, highly evolved monsters of a sort they'd never seen before. When the group was forced into a fight for their lives, Lambda abruptly awakened and used his powers to repel the monsters, saying to Asbel, you might recall, unless you want your friends to die here, you have to use my power. Which ties in with the whole the concern of death in this arc. Hoping to learn more about the monsters by consulting with Pascal, the party decided to leave the ruins for now, which, my friends, is where we left off. Well, and Pottery, you have to remember, you have to remember two things. First, I'm going into this blind, so I don't know how long the F arc is. So, maybe it's a hop, skip, and a jump like Alicia's story. Maybe it was teed up to be something more like Beyond the Dawn. So, especially before going to Japan, I was a little worried about rolling the dice with this. Also, you know me, and you know that you and I share the same brain. Any other combination of circumstances, I absolutely would have just pulled all-nighter to plow through this. But between getting ready for Japan and navigating hosting Matt and Dan, and also pushing through the end of my grad school apps, which were perhaps not as fun as pushing through the end of a masterpiece like Tales of Graces, but also had a fixed deadline that I couldn't control. Sometimes you gotta let it go. But it just gives it more time to digest before we get back into it, right? So it's a win-win so far as I'm concerned. Yeah, there you go. At least 5 streams left. So nice to know my intuition was helpful at least. Yeah, maybe third person limited to Asbel. That's kind of how it sounded to me. But it might be a limited omniscient, right? Because we didn't get like I was saying for instance the info about Sophie seeing that woman. So I feel like that's reasonable. Oh, we're here for the duration at this point, Grail. You understand. We're set up to do as much of the post game as we possibly can, and we love it. Turn that UG into a yes. And on that boisterous note, my dear friends, welcome back to Tales of Praxis. I've missed you. I hope that you've missed this. It was so fun journeying around Japan, and I got a lot of insights and great experiences, not just in terms of my long-standing brotherhood with Dan, but also in terms of some interesting cultural nuggets that made me think about parts of the Tales series differently. So I'm sure we'll have plenty to talk about there. But I did miss this wonderful weekly cadence of sitting down and digesting these stories with you. So nice to be back to it. Look, I've done it once, bro, so I'll do it again. I might groan about it, especially when we're in what's the most polite and spoiler-free way to say this? Some especially nostalgic places. I might grumble and drag my feet, but I will not back away from the challenge nor from the value of it. All right, so we are working our way out now? Yeah, we're just heading outside. It seems like such a simple directive, and yet I got myself so lost last time. Must you inconvenience us so? Perfect. Perfect. All right, let's get to look forward to once we're out of the dungeon. I think we've spent quite enough time in this dungeon at this point. I didn't think it was worth going back to, but you will recall that a lot of the last stream was dungeon crawling just to find our way through this place. I think my memory, and Grail, I'm sure you probably have a clearer sense of this dungeon than I do, but I feel like this way was the fast track way back. So my body's telling me to go this way rather than the way that I was starting out. So the mic was obviously, it was set up in a slightly different angle to manage two people back when Dan was here. So I tried my best with the limited time before the stream to fiddle with the settings to make it well balanced for me. But if it if it doesn't sound great between the sound from the stream and the sound from my voice, just let me know and I can tinker with it on the fly. Well, I think south is the general direction we want to go in, so we'll just feel our way back. We've been through worse together. Heavenly Step! Speaking of post-games from hell. I would rather do the whole Tales of Vesperia post-game than the Heavenly Step, I'll tell you that, Pottery. Because even though the payoff for the Heavenly Step was tremendous, and I think anyone who loves those games owes it to herself to do it just for that payoff, it was, I mean, talk about just grindy pain. That was much more agonizing to me than even something like the Necropolis of Nostalgia in Vesperia. Keep your guard. This simultaneously feels like an old friend, but also deeply foreign after playing hours and hours of Tales of Hearts yesterday. It was that delightful kind of jet lag day after taking a however many hour flight where I oscillated between naps and then waking up totally disoriented and popping on the Vita and playing a little bit of Hearts and then going back to bed. Okay. Well, here's my metric for that, Grail, since you're in the know about this. Would you say it's more annoying than Tales of Eternia's EX dungeon? Because that was basically the threshold where I said, I'm not even going to do this right now. I'm just going to watch the video of the end game. Not the Heavenly Step. I would grin and bear it through the Heavenly Step, but in terms of what they ask you to do to make it through the EX dungeon in Tales of Eternia, I could not. It would have added tens of hours to the playthrough just to do that. For a pretty bare bones addendum to the story. An important one, but one which I don't think... I would say I don't think you gain that much by experiencing it firsthand versus just knowing what the outcome of it is, which you can find on YouTube or what have you. And when I'm the one saying that, you know it's serious. This seems positive. A save point. Are we at the beginning? This is fun too. I don't remember whether I mentioned this during the last stream, but this has a nice little air of compliment to Dawn of the New World as well. The F arc with this idea of we've already gotten to know the world and journeyed through all its ruins, but here's the thing about ruins, they're all over the place and you can't count on them all having been excavated. And so then in a sequel, it's very easy to stumble upon further ruins that might have always been there, but simply weren't well understood or accessible during the events of the previous game or story. Well, here's what I'll say. We can commit to at least giving it the old college try. How about that? But we can also be, we can be adults about it. And if a point comes when we decide we just need to cut our losses, we can be okay with that too. Okay, so this felt like the exit, but I don't think we can get out from here. Oh, but can we just warp out of here? No, of course not. That would be too easy. I had hope for one brief and shining moment. Wow, this is a drag. This really made me feel like we were at the end. Although, you know, now I'm concerned because, who was it? Was it Asbel and Richard? I think they fell down to this level, so it might be that we need to literally level up before we can get out of the dungeon. We might be on the wrong floor. Yeah. Same brain, Grail. Same brain. All right, well, I've been vamping a lot about my past couple weeks, and I can surely vamp more, but yeah, any other holiday stories or gaming adventures that any of the gang wants to share while we're working our way out of this dungeon? Trying to think if I had any further good gaming adventures. No, it was really just Hearts. Hearts and Grata adventures. Oh yeah, I think I missed that message, Padre. How did you like it? Did you have any final impressions? Were you pleased with the end game? Was it what you expected? Grail, can you remind me the trigger for Excel mode also? Remember what it does, but for the life of me, I can't remember the button combination. Thank you.
Everyone did as well as could be expected.
Amazing. Well, that's about what I figured, given the praise everyone was heaping on it, because I figured if it fell flat in its end game, then even if the rest of it was dazzling, people would be understandably disappointed. So I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, it sounds like, I mean, just reading the tea leaves of what people have been saying about it and triangulating it with my previous experience as a gamer, it almost sounds like it's done this interesting thing where, oh, but this is down. That doesn't feel right. Oh, but this is down to the depths where the boss was, so we might have to. There's probably an elevator up elsewhere. Um, it almost like as successful as Skyrim obviously objectively has been. I feel like the interesting thing to me about Baldur's Gate 3 is it almost seems like it scratches this itch that people had playing Skyrim that was not quite satisfied by it. Where, yeah, Skyrim was a big world with plenty of hours to sink into it and had a bunch of different paths putatively to explore, but kind of left a lot of people feeling a little bit shortchanged in terms of like the tightness of the narrative value across all that exploration. Like we've talked about on the stream before, none of this is new, but it's interesting to me because when I hear a lot of what people say about Baldur's Gate 3, it almost sounds like in many senses it's a similar world but with a tighter narrative perspective.
Must you inconvenience us so?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, fair enough, Grail. I feel like a lot of the best quotes are like that. Where, like, even if it doesn't necessarily directly spoil the story, like, it's such a good quote that it kind of makes you actively wonder about what events in the story precipitated a character saying that in the first place, which, at least for me, sometimes I feel like can have the same effect of spoiling. Okay, so this is where we were before. I at least now have a bit of a sense of what we need to do. We need to find the path up. So I'm going to do that. And 3 Grail, that's the one that they like just did the remake or the port or whatever it is of, right? I have my personas right.
Keep your guard.
I think I saw them. They had a bunch of cool displays for it when they were promoting it at PAX West last year. Yes, green square. We're looking for the green squares. That's the other thing I did while I was in Japan. I sent in panel submissions for PAX East. So hopefully we will have occasion to be back there and talking about some more gamey stuff with fellow gamers in a couple months. It's in March. It's always one of our favorite cons to go to and lecture at.
Salon's triplets of terror. You can be such a child. You're both.
Oh, that's a green tile. That's probably the one that I missed. The one that I just ran right by. Okay, going up. Ah, this feels right. Man, that's the other thing I was enjoying about Hearts. I'll tell you what. It was like I got through its first really puzzle forward dungeon, and the puzzles in it was like, yeah, they were a little bit of a mind teaser, but it was easy to solve them, and the overall navigation of the dungeon remained very straightforward despite the presence of puzzles. Not to throw shade on this dungeon, because I'm sure, especially if we hadn't taken a 2.5 week break in the middle of it, it would not be this hard to find our way out, but it's also definitely a different design style. But now I think my logic from the beginning is sound, now that we're a floor up. If we just head south, I have a feeling we'll get out of here. I want to quickly just read also In the battle tips, because that R2 is not doing it for me. Are you sure it's R2, Grail? I wish this were easier to search. Selma, there it is. Oh, it is just R2. That's weird. I thought I did that and it didn't work. Maybe the gauge just wasn't over 50% at that point. Suspicious.
Stay safe, everyone.
Oh, I needed to hold it. That's fine. I was just pressing it. Lambda Soul Unleashed! That's such a cool effect. And I love the little forecast we got from you, Grail, how everyone gets the ability, but it's different for each of them. It's just my favorite kind of Tales thing. When Asbel enters Excel mode, the following support effects become active. Enemies can be staggered even if they've been downed. A surge of flame surrounds him that both harms foes and provides protection, and enemies are launched into the air when struck. Love it. But don't use it for too long or you'll disappear into a gross cocoon and vomit monsters everywhere. Nah, that's the old Lambda. He used to be a piece of shit. Used to be. I think we need to give him, like, at least another 6 months before we let him hold the baby pottery. Here's the thing. The monsters that were a part of his Dangerous Knights crew are still out in the world, so we need to at least exterminate the Dangerous Knights crew before we let Lambda hold the baby. Chicken spaghetti at World's Eye every night. Yeah, you're not sorry at all, Grail. Don't pretend. But it's okay. You can share. I've gotten enough pseudo-spoilers from Dan over the years about the Persona series. It's because, I mean, we've all talked about this in the past, but similar to what I was saying with Eternia and Hearts at the start of this, like, you need to be able to find and toe the line of saying just enough about a game to bully your friends into really wanting to play it, because you need to be able to talk about it with them without actually giving away the farm in the process. It's a tricky line to toe, but you can do it. When you activate Excel mode, you'll be invulnerable for about 1 second and cured of any physical ailments you may have. That's awesome. You can launch it even while you're taking damage, so it can be a real lifesaver if you're about to be KO'd. Celebrate life's grandeur, its brilliance, its magnificence. Yes, even I, with like the minimal amount of information I have about Persona 3, can certainly appreciate that. Yes, it's enough to make me want to play, so you have succeeded in the task of towing that line, Grail. Unsurprisingly. Alright, thank God. I thought that was going to be the rest of the arc, just being stuck in that dungeon.
That looks like Pascal's communicator.
Hold on, I'll get it. It's from Pascal, all right.
Likely some pathetic excuse about why she missed the boat.
It's birds all the way down, Pottery.
Says Sophie is with her.
Oh my God, the next few streams I'm sure are going to be us saying a bunch of random things and me finding ways to tie them into Japan. So I apologize in advance, but also like Grail, I'm not sorry. if you're not familiar with Japanese crows, I suggest you look them up. I should tweet the video that I got of them also. But like the most comically inhuman noise you can imagine comes out of their mouths, and you hear it everywhere, no matter where you are in Japan, because they're just hanging out everywhere. But it's like I can't even approximate it because I'm too human. But it's like ah ah ah, like if a demon were approximating a human sounding laugh. It's chilling and hilarious all at the same time. And they're also like this big, like the biggest fuckers you could ever imagine. So yeah, that's my bird tangent.
Asbel, what's going on?
Well, the truth is,
So she dreads the day we all pass away, and she's left behind.
That's so sad.
was there anything else Pascal mentioned?
It's a good question, Grail. I almost found myself wondering because it's one of those things where, yeah, you know, the norm of the fade to black function in storytelling like a JRPG is just to skip over a long explanation. But especially in a game like Tales of Graces, or the Tales series for that matter, I think it's worth asking, like, is it maybe serving another function? And especially given how raw and hard all of the development of Sophie has been over the game and everything that she's been through with everyone, I could almost imagine an interpretation of it less like it would take too long to explain and more like just it's almost unspeakable to imagine what it would be when we were all died and Sophie was left alone, and what if she became bitter and withdrew into herself like Lambda, like they don't want to voice it out loud even though they have to. So something to think about, at least as an alternative way of reading it.
Yes. She also asked us to come to the Amarcian Enclave. She didn't give any specifics, but she wants to tell us something about Fodra.
Is that right?
Well, it's good timing if nothing else. We need to talk about the monsters anyway.
I suppose we should head straight for the Enclave.
Lieutenant, the President has requested that you return to Strata and present him with a full report.
It does kind of call out for that sort of dual perspective storytelling, doesn't it, Grail? Yeah. Something like Azilia. I would play that. Awesome. Thanks, Grail.
Hubert, are you sure you should be ignoring the President like that? Yes, I'm sure it's fine. My subordinate can make the report as clearly as I.
Pottery? That would never happen. Stop talking out of your ass. Come on. Surely that would be too ludicrous to ever get off the ground, let alone to have a sequel.
It looks like someone is eager to see Pascal again.
Oh, what? I'll thank you to keep such ungentlemanly suggestions to yourself.
Pascal, let's make out.
Are you turning down the President's daughter because of Pascal?
Wait, what's going on? Nothing's going on.
Wait, what are you guys talking about?
Come on, let's go. Hurry up.
Reader of Hearts. Oh, must be a trophy for getting a certain number of titles. Sharia's speculation turns to certainty, even as she tries not to embarrass Hubert. Ah, the ability to intuit about the hearts. And is that... am I reading that right? I can't tell if that is what makes Excel available for her, or if it just improves it when she has it. But either way, it has indignation attached to it, so of course I'm going to put that on her. Makes it available to her. Awesome. So it's funny, Grail, because like I think I mentioned on the couple times before when I've tried to play Tales of Xillia, those attempts have been years apart from one another. So I can never perfectly remember who I decided to start with the previous time. I think whenever I've started, I have tried to start as Jude because that's more of my MO. And just given the choice between male and female protagonists, I usually start with the male ones and then work my way to the female ones. So unless there were reasons that the stream felt strongly about that it would be fun or rewarding to start with Milia instead, I think Jude is the way to go.
Hubert, I get all fluttery when you fix upon me with those puppy dog eyes.
I assure you that I was not looking at you, Captain.
That sounds like decisive reason to start with Jude to me, Pottery.
If you'd also like to have one of these, I'm sure Pascal...
Let's make that our tentative game plan then.
Let's send her a message right now.
No, Captain, wait! Please stop!
What? Don't you want one?
The mere thought of having to receive that woman's gibberish-filled reports makes me tremble in fear.
Makes him tremble in fear. Got it. Message sent.
Why did you do that?
Just kidding.
Captain!
I wish I'd sat on my Pascal let's make out joke. It would have been even better for that skit. Wait, so was there... Were you saying there was a skit at the save inside here, Grail? I'm assuming it's further up, right? I just don't want to miss it. But that's back to the Gustwork ruins there. Indignation is almost always disgusting, though. Like, never forget that the Tales series began with a casting of Indignation. It is, in many ways, the shot heard round the world. And through time, in that case. Oh, okay, so you were just talking about that one. Got it. Let's head outside then.
This will be a breeze.
Sometimes I can't see the...
We are very powerful in the cave.
There's no profit in the enemies here. It's a waste of time.
Hey!
That's another way to say it. Richard has a costume. Like he's unlocked it, or he's unlocked the title for it. King of Windor! Ooh, that is a cool costume. That was worth it. Any other good ones? No, really no other ones yet, except for Dark Enforcer, which breaks my brain too much.
This will be a breeze. Let's keep this up.
Yeah, I tweeted this too, but it was so awesome to see, like, besides people recognizing the Tales of Eternia box in Japan, like, literally you would go into department stores and you would see these big banners celebrating the anniversary of the series and Tales of Arise. Like, it was such a presence over there in a way that I didn't expect. So if you're ever finding yourself frustrated trying to explain the series to people in your neck of the woods who aren't familiar with it, just know that your fellow Talesheads are out there. They just might be on another continent or in another country. Ah, no worries, Pottery. I see the Baldur's Gate 3 addiction continues. A man after my own heart. Well, enjoy it. If you have any other thoughts or views on it, please continue sharing them with the stream. I love being able to play it vicariously through you and others even before I have the time to pick it up myself. And I'm glad that its ending didn't disappoint. So great to see you again, my friend. And like I said, we're back on the regular schedule now, so hope to see you again on Friday. It'll be an intimate second half of the stream for you and me, Grail, but we're no strangers to that, are we?
I'm so surprised you're still a bachelor, Captain.
Yeah, especially at your age.
You're old!
Was that necessary?
I mean, you don't have a girlfriend?
No.
What a waste. Any girl would be thrilled to have someone like
Sharia, let's make out.
So, Sharia, will you go out with me?
Captain, you can't be... not Sharia.
Oh
I'm
no.
sorry.
Is it the funniest plot in the history of Tales?
Catch are always the ones who throw you back.
Captain Malik, I can't believe...
Relax, it was just a joke. Now go chase after her.
Yes, sir.
Thanks to those two, I can't help but remember.
No.
Now, I taste the lilac liqueur we drank when we were both stationed at the same Velanik hotel. How I'd love just one more drink. Aurelia.
Malik, no. Don't make us think about Lorelia again. I had just gotten over your heartbreaking backstory and was enjoying what a jokester and scamp you were being. I wonder if anything more happens in the F arc if we visit her grave again. That was a really touching moment of the post-game wrap-up in Act 3. Now we can just teleport. Alright, awesome. I was just going to find the inn or a shop to restore Elith. If I can find it. Maybe it's easier to just go.
Hey, look.
That's interesting, Grail. I'll be really interested to keep that in mind as I go on in Hearts, because I can already see what I imagine are some of the points of resonance that you're talking about, but also like I see such big strands of other games like Symphonia and Tales of the Abyss in it, like I was kind of alluding to before, especially with the whole central thread of Kohaku and everything that the party has to do to help her. But I kind of, between that and what you were saying about Graces, it almost just makes me feel like, similar to Eternia, it's one of those games that's going to be interesting just to see why and how it melds so many different elements of a variety of the Tales games that kind of naturally complement each other, even though we don't always see them showing up in the same game. So it has definitely piqued my interest, no doubt about that. And not that there ever was any doubt.
It's Pascal.
Hello, everyone. We've been expecting you. Where are Sophie and Pascal? They're off visiting the Fendel Glacier ruins.
We come all this way and she isn't here. That is so like her. What are they doing at the ruins?
Fendel has soldiers stationed there, but they've suddenly gone quiet. We fear that monsters may have forced their way inside.
So Pascal and Sophie went there to see if they could help.
Then we'd better follow them.
Alright, now we can restock in town before we go to the ruins. I think that's the play. Oh, that is really useful context, Grail. Yeah, I was going to ask actually about its provenance in terms of the different teams who have worked on the series, because like it's been a really interesting exercise for me to try to place its battle system. Because of course it has something like, what is the term for it? Something equivalent to CC in terms of, a counter for actions that you can take during battle. But it also feels much TP heavier to me than a game like Graces, let alone Cisteria and Berseria. So I guess that's another way of saying what I was saying before in terms of my feeling that it kind of melds a bunch of different design philosophies and themes that it's concerned with from different games.
So, this is Pascal's home, is it? The Amarcian Enclave.
This is your first time visiting?
Yes, what a strange city. It's in the middle of a snowy mountain, but it isn't cold at all. And such advanced infrastructure.
I definitely see destiny in it also, by the way, with the whole,
If only
like, I think there's some interesting intersectionality between the way that Somas work and the way that Swordians work.
I must
That's what I'm saying, like, the more you look at it, the more it seems like just this magical mosaic of all the different games. Or many of them, at least.
Have you really introduced yourself to your future friends and family?
My future family? What do you mean?
Pascal's friends and family, of course.
Oh, interesting. I'll have to keep that in mind once we get to Zilia, too.
Go and say hello to them, don't you think?
What? Pascal's friends? I already took care of that. What? Who told you to? Why would you? Was that wrong? Pascal's always helping us out, so I told her friends how much we appreciate her. Oh, so that's what you meant. For a moment there, I thought you'd done me a favor. Wait, how did I become the bad guy?
As a joke. Yeah, what years were Hearts and Hearts Are Grail? Do you know off the top of your head? So I was curious and trying to place it. Yeah, I'll have to look it up. Alright, Elith Mixer all charged. Any requests? No. Also, I don't know what this says about Hearts. Maybe it's just that it's a new Tales game and I'm this deep into Tales of Praxis that I want to try everything out, but for whatever reason I've gotten much more into cooking in it than, as you know, I've been wont to do in the past with Tales games. So maybe just because it's relatively simple and intuitive and there aren't a lot of levers to it, and you can pretty easily get to some pretty useful effects with some of the higher level recipes. And also, maybe if I'm being honest, it's part to do with the fact that they wrote the Wonder Chef's character as so much like funnier and more multi-dimensional than usual. Or like he's a want-to-be bodybuilder and Adonis who somehow has been shoehorned into the role of cooking instead. For context, because this is not a spoiler, it's just part of the hilarious texture of Tales of Hearts. It has the Wonder Chef, and whenever he shows up, he's wearing a sleeveless Wonder Chef uniform and doing like Superman, Arnold Schwarzenegger poses, flexing his muscles. Yeah, peak fiction is the only thing to say about it. Absolutely. I'm forgetting where the shop was in town. Oh, I think it's up the stairs, right? Oh, really? That's interesting trivia. That could be a whole other fun study in itself, just looking at the way in which they reuse or reimagine music in different games. Or different versions of the games. I'm telling you, like one of the many reasons that Tales of Fantasia compilation that I picked up would be cool to look at and listen to and think about. I feel like we haven't been dualizing in a minute. Is there anything especially good that we can make right now? What about weapons? Oh, don't worry, Grail. There was never any doubt we were going to go wild. I'm just going back to my default of trying to improve the characteristics. Seems like the most it can do is just increase the quality of the mind skill. Here, we'll do some CC stuff. That's never a bad idea. CC stuff always helps. It's so funny to me that competent is a higher level quality, because that sounds to me like the lowest level acceptable quality. Like, yeah, this is passable. It's competent. It'll do the job, but is that what you want? Yeah, I was laughing with Dan Grail when I started playing Hearts, because, you know, as we've been talking about off and on the stream, like, Many is the Tales protagonist who doesn't seem to have a lot of interest in anything to do with the sexual elements of the other gender. So, you know, we've had like the recurring joke of how Saray is ruined sexual, and Velva clearly has a lot of things on her mind, few of which have anything to do with boys, and so on and so forth. Stan, another great example. Cress. So then I started Hearts, and I said to him, you know how we've been joking around at how very few of the Tales protagonists have any like sexual interest in other characters? Well, that's because they saved it all and packed it into one protagonist in Tales of Hearts. Very different feel right off the bat, which I am here for. I think that's one of the things that has my interest peaked in the game, to be honest. Alright, I think that's adequate for now. Well, did you write down the ideas at least? Because I would say if you wrote down the ideas, I mean, that still counts as a success. I mean, even having the ideas is a success, but if you make the effort to write them down, like, I think that's the kind of effort that adds up. Emil's Carta. Courage is the magic that turns dreams into reality. I really feel like they should have saved that for Richter's Carta, but whatever. I'm gonna hold off on those armor sets. I think we're good to go at this point. So we're going to the Glacier Ruins, right? Well, I forget whether Dan talked about this while he was here, but he's been working on some writing, and what he often says is he'll just like go for a walk or a hike or something, and one of the reasons that he loves to just go out and clear his head in nature is that sometimes ideas will just fall into his head for the writing that he's working on. And same thing you're talking about, right? I mean, it's not like a fully formed chapter or something, but I think oftentimes, like, if you can get excited about an idea, get enough of those ideas, and it'll point the way to the structure it wants to be embedded in, right? They'll kind of start telling the story for you, especially as you get to know your characters a little bit more and feel out like, all right, what would they do in this situation rather than what I would want them to do? Stuff like that. I know I've talked about before how, you know, when I'm off on a run or something like that, one of my favorite things about that is, you know, I'll get ideas for particular moves in my analyses, or ideas of things to study that are just so impossible to reach for when you're just sitting down and trying to make it happen. Sometimes you have to get out of your own head a bit, you know? But I'll tell you, man, I think setting your intention to sit down and focus on it is half the battle. So seriously, props to you for doing that. And I hope it goes without saying, but if you want to share any of those ideas, you know your boy over here is always interested in them.
We should hurry.
To the Valkanus! At the bottom of everything. Oh, really? I'll have to keep an eye out. I don't think he's learned that one yet in mine. But I have been loving his array of arts. He feels, well, honestly, I think I said, like, it's a toss-up for me right now between Hearts and Eternia, which my favorite battle system is, and I don't think it's a coincidence that Reed and Core both have melee flows that, to me, are just really intuitive, nice to chain together, easy to manage. That makes a big difference in my playstyle. Symphonian Scepter! Oh, they know our thing! A rapier said to conduct a tune that brings about world regeneration when wielded by a master. Now they're kind of shoehorning the musical element in to justify the name after the fact, but I'll take the reference all the same. I'll take it. It better be the best thing for Richard. Good enough. Oh, did they not have gems right now? Oh, let's give them something. Oh, it was just Richard because he'd been gone for a while. You also have a very weak gem. Let's try to give you something better. Yeah, I'm a super fan of Hisui right now. He's the ultimate big brother, right? And that's such a satisfying and heartwarming trope, and the way he's just like an overprotective blockhead with a heart of gold right off the bat. I mean, that's so compelling and endearing to me too. All of the end scenes of him just going after Core, like, hey, don't try to get in bed with my sister. You stay away from my sister. I'm going to make you sleep on the floor instead of anywhere near my sister. Do you know the history, Grail, of why they changed Core's name, even though it was just a sub rather than a dub? I was really curious about that, because for, like, the first several hours of the game, I thought I was losing my mind, because, like, I don't speak Japanese, but I can, like, hear well enough to recognize the word core or something different in the speech that's coming through. And it's like, as you just said, like, that's very clearly not his name in the script as written, but they changed it all the same for the subtitles. I wonder why. I haven't looked it up. Yeah, that's about where I was coming down on it too, Grail. Like, even if it's not his best, I'm gonna just make it his best. You gotta respect Symphonia, no matter what format they give it to you in.
Like the old days.
Oh, weird. Like the word cur? Is that a slur? Maybe in England. Yeah, I had to double check looking it up. I've never really heard it referred to as a slur, but so the literal meaning of a cur is an aggressive dog or one that is in poor condition, especially a mongrel. And so, I mean, you can imagine sort of the insulting tenor with which you would call someone a cur, like an idiot base dog without any kind of, you know, real decorum to one's character. But I don't know that I've ever heard it referred to as a slur. But I could see it, like, you know, if they didn't want that association with his character, especially Like, especially in a game where like all of the characters' names are very clearly like symbolic and meant to point to some aspect of their character. Like, if that's not the character description that they wanted to connote, you would see why they would just want to move away from it entirely. I get that. Oh, you were talking about his original name. Got it. Got it. I thought you were talking about cores and what they changed it to. Yeah, that I guess I could see that too. But yeah, I mean, kind of idle speculation without the actual story. But we can look it up at some point. Scars of Eternia. Now here's what I can get behind. Throwing blades packed with Creus energy. It said the scars they inflict will never heal. Wow. So, I said I can get behind it. That's kind of more an allusion to the antagonist than to our heroes. But that in itself says something kind of interesting that feels very thematically right about Eternia. So I can get on board with that one. And that was for whom? For Sharia. Right. Well, another one we can turn into her best weapon. Angie's Carta. Oh my, then this meeting must be fate. Her I don't know, so I'm imagining she might be from one of the games that never made it over here. Yeah, I thought that like the one thing blocks in frozen places were supposed to be good for was staying in place. That somehow doesn't seem to be the case here, does it, Grail? Oh, did you have a spoilery thought? Maybe someone I have yet to meet in Hearthstone.
Plenty of room for improvement, but we can let it slide.
Oh, I see. One of the ones with a fan port, or just... Because I hesitate to say it's just one I haven't gotten to, because that pile is getting pretty thin at this point. Unless she's someone who just properly fell out of my head from Legendia. Which, I mean, I wouldn't count that out as a possibility, but all the same. Ricardo's Carta. Kids again? Another one I don't know. Yeah, I guess I'm gonna have to get on the fan translations at some point. How is that so? I did find and get a copy of Japanese Tales of Innocence while I was in Japan, just for my collection. So maybe in years, if and when I finally learn Japanese, I'll be able to enjoy that one. That was a cool art of Richard's. I don't know that I'd seen or processed that one before. Yeah, funny enough, Grail. I think you have mentioned that once or twice. No, not a bunch, but I have a vague memory of that. Just like I may or may not have vaguely mentioned that I like a little game called Tales of the Abyss. That's one of the things that got me really interested too, because like, of course, as I was saying before, the idea of what is it to be a human being and what are all the different constituents that go into that. That's native to Tales of the Abyss. But also, like, the fact that you have the mirror of Tales of the Abyss starting out with a reading from the score, and Tales of Hearts starting out with the reading of this fairy tale, which then plays maybe a not so fairy part in the game. Pretty interesting parallel right off the bat. I'm interested. Tempest Bringer, a bladerang said to fly fast enough to disturb weather patterns. It belonged to a famous king. And if and when I ever find a way to play Tales of the Tempest, I'm sure I will appreciate that. Yeah, see, I know all the names. I just want to know all the games. That's the difference. And it's great that all of these weapons that allude to other games are here, but talk about annoying that they incentivize you to redo all of the same block puzzles that you've already done. And it's a stretch to call this a puzzle. This is more like busy work at this point, especially after we figured it out once. Oh, this was already done, though. Well, I was stupid for that, then.
Let's begin.
I know, I would say that they were dumping all of them on us at once, but we also got the Tales of the Abyss one in the last dungeon. Well, I guess in fairness to them, there are quite a lot of games to get through in just one arc of a game if they're trying to do a weapon for every single other game in the series, which I assume they are, so... I'm sure there'll still be some left after we're done here.
Nice, Richard. That was impressive.
Well, I'm nowhere near your level, Asbel.
Yeah, well, that's what I was kind of thinking. Like, maybe it's not so much that they're all condensed in here, and maybe more just that they were underrepresented in the last dungeon. Like, it might just be that with the number of games they have to get through, we'll see a bunch of those weapons in, like, this dungeon and all the other ones going forward. Or, maybe they want to give them to us early enough that we have the ability to actually develop them as weapons and use them in the rest of the arc, which I would appreciate. Because, like, you get like Tales of Fantasia weapon in the final dungeon right before the last boss. You're not exactly going to have a lot of time to use it except on New Game Plus, Oh, no kidding. Best in the game. I'll have to keep an eye on that when it procs for her.
We must always give it our best.
I'm liking Asbel's.
Was it?
It really feels like a hard-won and well-deserved boost to his abilities when it unlocks. Like, because it's an ability that, for him, directly derives from everything that he was able to achieve with Lambda. And so I think it's a testament to the development expertise of the team that they were able to really make a mechanic that feels that powerful and like a good representation of everything Asbel has been through with Lambda without breaking the game. Really cool also, I was talking over it when it came by in the shot, but how Richard's Symphonia weapon has a little angel wing on it, like the kind we would see on Colette or Mythos. Yeah, well, it's that kind of, it's, to me, one of the best kinds of JRPG power creep, where sometimes there are abilities that you only get really late in the game, and you might find yourself saying, oh man, like, I really have to learn something new when there's not that much of the story left to go. But oftentimes when it's done right, like we were just talking about, those really are some of the most overpowered abilities, and overpowered in a way that makes sense and mechanical value out of all of the progress that the characters have had over the course of the game. Like I actually wrote about this in a great dovetail to the collector's edition I was showing you at the start of the stream. This was part of what I wrote about in my study of Xenoblade Chronicles 2, because that is a great example where very late in the game, and I think it's second to last chapter if memory serves, you are still learning like substantively new things about the battle system after Numa joins the fray and things get more complicated. But they get more complicated in a way that makes you much more powerful, and more powerful exactly because the bonds between Rex and Pyra and Mithra and the player have developed to the point that they can, within the game, logically count on each other to further tap into their abilities than was previously possible. So oftentimes when you have a really well written JRPG, like you can turn your attention to any mechanic in the game and ask, all right, why is it being introduced now? What does it say about the development of the characters? And what is it enabling them to achieve next in their development along with the player? How does it help us to enact their journey? And more often than not, I think you can come up with a good and illuminating answer for those questions.
She makes us come all this way and then... what was she thinking? Come on, are you still talking about that, Hubert? They had more urgent business to deal with than wait for us. Well, of course I know that.
Yeah, lifesavers. That's a great point of it too, Grail, especially in a design language like Tales where the post-game content can jump so much in difficulty. That's another great justification for it. Like, you need a new awesome ability to keep up with the curve. And it shows that the world is just continuing to expand and become more complicated and challenging, and you have to rise to the occasion or get left behind, right?
He's worried about her.
He is, isn't he?
What is up with those two?
But importantly, and in keeping with the themes of Graces and other JRPGs, you have to rise to the occasion in a way that is only possible by helping and supporting others, and looking to the support of others in your own development. Like, notice, Asbel only got his Excel ability through working and collaborating with Lambda, someone whom he had helped in the past, and Sharia only got her Excel ability in combination with a title that she got from insight into Hubert's character and his affections toward Pascal. So, at least thus far, no one's gotten this ability just in a vacuum through their own sheer force of will, and I would be very surprised if that ended up being the case for any of these characters, and it would be something I would say that would demand explanation. Her running sound effects, how I missed them.
Sophie, gotcha.
It's strong.
You sure
It's me,
caused trouble.
boy who loves you.
You saved my life! Totally awesome! Time for a selfie!
Pascal, let's make out.
The party will have to wait for now.
Just won't go down easily.
Oh, they turned her funny up to 11 for the F arc. I love it.
Yeah! That was so great!
Sophie didn't like that.
That was... Lambda's power.
I almost don't even want to put her in with Asbel because I feel like she was just thrown for such a loop. But I also really want to put her in. Oh my god. Like, what would you do, right? What would you do in that situation if you were Sophie and your entire existence had been predicated on eradicating this thing, and you had gone through so much work with your friends to change your point of view on that thing, and recognize, as she says in that last scene at the Lestalia, like, the kind of thing that Lambda has become now doesn't need to be destroyed, so he's okay. And then after all that work, to see that unique power come back in a purely destructive form, emerging from what looked like pure channeled rage on Asbel's part. Asbel, the one who had like coaxed out her humanity in the first place when she was reconstituted on Lot Hill, like, how do you make sense of yourself when all of your relationships are just turned upside down in that one moment? Oh, do we have the perfect picture for this? We do. Yes. So that picture is what I was trying to say in words. But I think the picture is more eloquent than I am.
Everyone stay on your game.
God, that face of Asbel's it froze on too. I didn't like it. Sophie would remember that. Yeah, so interesting to keep in mind, as Sophie's clearly going to have to cope with whatever this new Asbel plus Lambda synthesis has to do with her and her own identity. Remember that what she is wrestling with is, what will my identity be after everyone I know and care about has died? And the way that Lambda convinced Asbel to use Lambda's power was by saying, all of your friends are going to die unless you use this ability of mine. That is the perfect name for this track. I was just thinking the last time I was pausing to do strategy. What a great track. All the music in Graces, I know it's been a constant theme how great it is, but I really feel like they've been even extra killing it in the F arc. At least for these really upbeat, epic battle themes. So of course there's a lot of really heartfelt, quiet piano music like we've talked about that Sakuraba absolutely kills in the main game. Promised Battle, yeah, that's another great name. Don't think I've ever been disappointed by the name to a Tales track.
That's the last of them.
Dance of Madness, yeah, that says everything you need to know about Emerald, doesn't it?
I'm disappointed to find them here as well.
Have you guys fought those things before?
We faced similar monsters in Windor. If it wasn't for Lambda's power, we'd almost certainly have perished.
Well, I mean, that's what Lambda said.
Yeah, it appears that way.
Well, he seems useful enough, so I guess it's okay.
I'm not worried about it! I'm not worried about it at all!
I mean, he worked really well against those guys.
We're trying to learn why the monsters have grown so aggressive recently. Is there anything you can tell us?
No, I'm not really a biologist or whatever. You should talk to Fourier. Where is she now? Well, she usually locks herself in her lab, but right now I think she's at the Amarcian Enclave.
Restless Sword, another great name. Ah, you know what I like with swords, Grail. A simple kind of guy.
I want to talk to you guys about some stuff anyway.
Man, that is a great outfit for Richard. So regal.
What is Lambda doing to Asbel?
Super good stuff, probably.
Sophie, are you okay?
It's not going to be like last time. I promise we won't have to fight. Don't worry, Sophie.
Same old, same old. Yeah, some characters like Asbel change, but others simply do not. Pascal, as she always is, nothing unusual. In other words, she's just as unusual as she usually is. A great title for Pascal. Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Grau. Yeah, no, I'm glad you shouted out the soundtrack names. I'm telling you, that was one of my favorite parts of, I mean, talk about the utility of getting and downloading the soundtracks. Like, it's nice to listen to them, but also just looking at the track list and seeing all the names. It really contextualizes some of the songs in pretty different lights. And the story that the songs are representing.
Asbel will be all right, Sophie. I know it.
Richard.
Things are different. It won't be like when I merged with Lambda. Asbel has what it takes to confront Lambda directly, without facing any repercussions. His will is strong enough to keep things in check. That's why I know he'll be okay. I wanted you to know as much.
Thank you, Richard. And I wanted to say, I'm sorry.
For what?
For what happened 6 months ago. I thought I should apologize.
I tried to kill you a lot.
I'm the one who needs to apologize. It was all my fault. And I'm sorry.
So, are we back to being friends?
Yes.
Then I'll be your friend too.
You too?
Sophie, this man is dangerous. Let's move away from him.
Wait, the captain is dangerous?
Oh yes.
I see your majesty still has a biting sense of humor.
Sophie, let's make out. That was kind of funny how they faded out their lines as they moved away. My read on it, Grail, is I feel like the direction is to have a kind of royal affectation to the voice, right? Because, like, if you think about or listen to rulers of kingdoms, especially how they're represented in more old school contexts, like, they'll oftentimes talk in a stilted, almost theatrical tone of voice, almost as if to distinguish themselves from ordinary people. And to invoke the kind of divine right that the monarchy has typically had. Like, they're not ordinary people. They're descended from this divine lineage or whatever, right? So I feel like at least one reading you could have of it was, you know, Richard was just kind of like he grew into that, you know, tone of voice and disposition based on the house he grew up in. And now, even though, as with all of these characters, he's kind of outgrown his initial context, also, like all these characters, that initial context he grew up in has left a mark on him. It's a pretty great skit. Have we seen your favorite, or is that still coming up? The Ifrit cloak, believed to have been lost by the royal family. That's right. We were getting all of the different elemental cloaks last time, including the gnome cloak, which raised the interesting question of what it means for there to be an implied summon spirit of Earth in a world where there's no basic Earth Eleth. I'm looking forward to it. Well, that last skit set a high bar, so I truly can't wait to see what surpasses it. Yeah, I'm interested to see how this unfolds, because like we were talking about, I mean, you can see and intuit why it's so, like, upending for Sophie to see Asbel channeling Lambda's power. But at the same time, like, she was so confident at the end of the game that Lambda really had become something different thanks to Asbel bringing it into himself, and that, you know, Lambda was no longer something to be feared, and that Asbel had done the right thing. So for her to be so terrified of Asbel using Lambda's power, it's like, did she not really believe that at the end of the third act? Was she just kind of trying to talk herself into believing that it was going to be okay because she cared for Asbel and she didn't feel like she had any other choice at this point because he'd already done it and absorbed Lambda. Like, I feel like there's a little bit of tension between how she's acting now and how the third act resolved itself. Not to say tension in the point of, like, you know, the writers of the story not doing the character justice or forgetting what had happened before. Like, I think the tension wants to be there, and it's something worth thinking about as we go forward. Because it probably points to what Sophie is wrestling with. Yeah, no doubt, but that's what I'm saying, Grail. Like, Lambda certainly has that track record, but like in that last scene when they confronted him and after Asbel had had the like war of words with Lambda, it really felt like on a like intuitive and metaphysical level, Sophie could sense like a difference in Lambda, like that Lambda had essentially changed, which would, at least to me, imply that there had been a break in what Lambda was now versus the kind of Lambda that was implied by its previous track record. So maybe either I was just more confident in that than Sophie was, or maybe Sophie was kind of trying to convince herself of something she didn't fully believe in terms of Lambda having changed or been capable of change. Nothing we need to resolve right now, to be sure, but we can keep an eye on it as we go on here. Oh, that might be my very favorite post-battle scene in this game. That's so touching. Ugh. It goes back to another thing we've said many times about this game. It is so masterful at interweaving high moments of comedy with deeply touching and sincere moments. Like, the comedy is never used to poke fun at the story that's being told, or make fun or make light of it. It's a story that is sincere in ways that sometimes can be really touching and emotional and hard, and sincere in ways that can sometimes be totally hilarious. Ovenik. That's a good name. Oh, good memory, Grail. Yeah, now that you say that, I think I remember it too. So all the cooler, right, to use just two little moments like that to show so many like hours worth of character growth. Hours in game time. Like, they've come so far since those first moments when they were fighting together. Hermana's Carta. Don't worry about it. From now on, eat your fill, okay? Based on what you said before, Grail, I'm going to guess that's another Innocence one. It makes me want to play Innocence. Bamco, please. Acknowledge my studies and tributes to your amazing stories, and then use it as motivation to release official ports of all the games you haven't ported over here. I'm begging you. Alright, I'm assuming we're good to go back to the Enclave now, Grail? A malevolent spirit of the Threshing House in Slavic folklore, that sounded Slavic to me, whose name is derived from barn, prone to burning down the threshing houses by setting fire to the grain. To placate him, peasants would offer him roosters and bliny. I don't even know what bliny is. On New Year's Eve, the touch of an ovnik would determine their fortune for the new year. like a malicious groundhog or something in the Groundhog's Day tradition. A warm touch meant good luck and fortune, while a cold touch meant unhappiness. Yeah, exactly like Groundhog's Day. That's hilarious. Like a little bit of Krampus and a little bit of Groundhog's Day all rolled into one. Oh, but we still have to leave the dungeon before we can warp. Alright, back the long way. Oh, but there's the warp. I forgot about that. Excellent. They do, I know. I was so disillusioned by the last dungeon that I just assumed they would have erased the warp or something. Oh. Might as well refill on Elith while we're here. Is anything ready to duelize? Oh yeah, because we got all those new weapons. Excellent. Oh, I'm wondering what. Because we don't have the Abyss Sword equipped. Whom was that for? Was it for Asbel? And I just didn't want to replace Excalibur? Am I blind? Radiant Howl, right. Oh, there it is. Yes, I'm completely blind. Alright, there. Might as well equip everyone with their awesome cameo weapons. I don't think we'd found any other ones yet. And now we can trick them all out. And then move on. How can we improve its quality? Yes, we can. Good. Untamed is the perfect quality for an Eternia weapon. I might also think about, just the more I am continuing to lose my mind about how great it is, prioritizing an Eternia stream for us at some point, because it's like, it's such a rare game to even see online because it's so old, but I do believe every Tales fan and JRPG fan should play it. It warmed my heart to know that it was so famous over in Japan, because I really do feel like it's the kind of game that ought to be that famous everywhere. It has so much to say about so many of the things that we care about in life and that JRPGs care about in the stories that they tell and how they tell them. Oh, that's awesome, Grail. Yeah, I'm sorry. I totally missed that. Yeah, and I also think, I mean, I feel like they're good at introducing folklore stuff, especially in like the end game and post game stuff. So I need to do better, I think, on my part, just looking at the enemy names, because my guess is that's not the only one. Oh, do you mean like, did Eternia miss the timing on the new system release? Like it was for the PlayStation right around when the PlayStation 2 came out? Horsekill Dragon is this one's name. Yeah, that's always tough. And I feel like that happens pretty frequently. Like, you could almost make a list of the games that just miss the timing, because oftentimes I feel like it's right when a system is hitting its stride and developers have really figured out the best ways to tell a story on it, that then, like, the creators of the system are ready to move on to the next one, just as some of the best games are coming out on it. And again, I wish I could come up with more examples off the top of my head, but I'm sure between a lot of us we could pull some examples out of the air for it. I'm sure Eternia is not the only one. Yeah, that's awesome, Grail. Remind me, is it your first con? Have you been to cons before? Is it like a specific like video game con or a bigger con than that? Definitely let me know if you find any cool Tales stuff, because that's one I'm always looking forward to, and I feel like it's pretty rare at most cons. Like, I know I said this at the time, but I was so surprised to find Tales of Xillia and Tales of Xillia 2 at PAX West, because I think it was the first time truly I'd seen like any Tales stuff at any PAX, except for the Tales of Destiny copy that I got at PAX East before that. But yeah, pretty rare. Oh, nice. Yeah, well, I mean, in my opinion, that's the best way to do it. Just find a con that you like, and then just, if you can, make a habit of going to it year after year. Because, like, the cultures of cons are so specific, so oftentimes, like, you don't know what you're getting until you go at least once. But if you go and you like it once, I would say chances are pretty good you're going to like it again. Yeah, definitely keep a list of the highlights, and you'll have to share with the stream on Monday. I'll be excited to know the good, the bad, and the ugly of your time there. Oh, to the Overseer's room. Okay. Why would Fourier be in her room? That would be too easy. Well, I have a pretty good hunch of what's being redacted there based on where we're going, but time will tell.
Oh my gosh, Fourier, I haven't seen you in forever. Just when I thought it was safe to relax. It looks like you brought the whole gang with you.
And none of you have showered, and I hate that.
Listen, Fourier, we need your help.
Man, I will say though, this is probably TMI, but I couldn't figure out how to work any of the washing machines in Japan. So like, I would do just like water washes of my clothes. By the end of that trip, like, I was smelling ripe just because I couldn't figure out how to get into clean clothing. So I was very happy to get back to my home and not just take a shower, which I'd been doing. I took showers the whole time, but to actually like wash my clothes and get into clean clothes. I felt an aspect of Tales of Graces I was not expecting to feel on my trip to Japan.
When monsters change, it's usually due to a mutation triggered by their environment.
Sorry, but could you explain?
All creatures have the ability to adapt to changing conditions. It's what allows the species to thrive. For example, if animals from a warm climate are transported to a colder one, many of them will perish. However, the strong ones will adapt and evolve in order to survive.
So is that what's happening here?
It's called natural selection.
Yes. I would assume the monsters are evolving to better meet the threat posed by humans.
So you think we're helping to make the monsters stronger?
That's what I just said, isn't it? Of course, it's just a hypothesis. But doesn't it usually take forever for things to evolve? Normally, yes. Evolution is a slow process that takes several generations to unfold. But we have numerous examples of sudden mutations in monsters, especially those that live near the volcanoes. In other words, outside interference greatly increases the odds of rapid mutation. I would theorize that an unknown being is affecting them, perhaps something similar to Lambda or Lestalla.
Yeah, between 16 and 24 levels based on the most up-to-date scientific research.
Do you think Lambda himself might be responsible?
Absolutely not.
Ooh, that was a chilling line reading combined with the music falling out. Oh, guys, I'm kind of worried about Asbel. Oh! can't believe I didn't play this back in the day when I played Graces. This is so interesting. Oh! He's back in the metaphysical therapy room. Oh, but Lambda's a different color now.
Can you be so certain? Do you doubt my powers?
Put a pin in that, Grail, because I have a thought.
I made a decision to exist together with you, so of course I'm going to trust you.
Did you say trust?
You lent me your power because you were trying to help. Isn't that right?
Even if true, I would do so only because you are my host vessel. Though I exist inside you, do not be so arrogant as to think you can control me.
Avatar.
I'm not trying to control you. You helped us back there. You saved our lives. I haven't thanked you yet, so thanks.
I'll put a pin in that too, Grail, because that actually relates to what I was thinking about the tenor of his voice.
This is nonsense.
I don't know if Lambda influenced the mutations.
Yeah, so really quickly, just so we don't lose it, my thought about the really slow cadence of Lambda's voice, Grail, was I don't know if this came up back during the endgame of Act 3 when we were thinking about Lambda, but I think there's an interesting sense in which you could explain the slow cadence of his voice, like the way he kind of like wraps his voice around words. It almost feels to me like someone trying to approximate what a human would sound like, right? Which is why I smiled when I saw you calling out Tales of Symphonia, also because the example I had off the top of my head was someone like Tabitha, right? A doll meant to approximate and act, well, in Tabitha's case, as a vessel for a human, but in Lambda's case, you know, this being that is very directly not a person, but had kind of been sculpted into this human-like thing by virtue of everything that happened with him and Cornell raising him and the influence of Emerald torturing him and everything in between, right? So I think while that might be sort of a frustrating idiosyncrasy for a lot of other voices, I can almost hear Lambda like trying to like will his thoughts into speech that someone would be able to understand, which says a lot to me about how isolated he feels, that he needs to make such an effort to be understood at all on the literal level, let alone anything like emotions or his will or intent, which might even support why like even now as he is seemingly trying to help Asbel and his friends, like he feels very guarded and unwilling to admit that, and he's afraid that Asbel is going to try to control or subsume him rather than just have a conversation and understand him. Also, great timing because Grail, I'm sure you'll remember this, we're working through and talking about like the nature of trust with these two entities cohabiting each other right after, without, I don't think this is a spoiler, but with minimal spoilers, like there's a very, very cool meditation on the nature of doubt and what it means to doubt someone and how that relates to trust in Tales of Hearts. And I just played that like a couple days ago, so it's super fresh in my head. Hearts has such a cool way of physicalizing and creating metaphor and symbols out of emotions and what it takes to understand one's own emotions and use them as a way of relating to others and relating to the world. And so it only goes, I think, to your point, Grail, of how intimately related these two games are, that they're both thinking in these pretty robust ways about, like, what does it really mean to trust someone, what's in the way of that, and what kind of activities and forms of cooperation can actually build trust and overcome doubt, because doubt can so easily become this seemingly insurmountable wall, as seems to have been the case with Lambda. Yeah, or maybe he just ShamWowed it from Richard. That is another plausible explanation, no doubt.
But I didn't sense his power in those monsters. If that's the case, then I think the problem might be up there.
The ceiling? Oh, no, she means beyond the ceiling.
In Fodra? I wanted to talk to you because Fodra's been acting kind of wonky.
Yeah, well, it's just, I mean, we have to be careful with this because we're going to start just using these streams as an excuse to talk about hearts, which is fine, but I also don't want to spoil it for anyone or take away from what we're playing. But yeah, I think to build a whole game where one of the central, like, dungeon navigation and, like, character progression mechanics is very directly grounded in the idea of an emotion and what it is to understand and express an emotion, like, you have to have a very clear perspective on what it means to be emotionally intelligent and what it takes to develop that ability. And I think that really shines through in the journey that the game wants to take you on and how it articulates it in the level design and the character design and everything like that. Really smart metaphorical storytelling in a way that I think only points out how many games that dabble in metaphor do so either less successfully or less globally than something like Hearts does.
I didn't even notice until Poisson and the Overseer brought it up. But ever since, me and all the other Amarcians have been studying it. About 2 months ago, we found Elith gushing from a point on the surface.
This also puts me in mind of Tales of Eternia, with Keel doing measurements on a certain celestial body early in the game.
Therefore, Fodra's supposedly non-functional core is showing signs of activity. If Fodra's core is in fact the source of all life, then yes, it's conceivable that the core might be promoting evolution in the monsters. Is my sister the best or what?
Oh. No, Pascal, you're the best.
Okay, guys, I gotta take the shuttle and zip off to Fodra.
Bye-bye.
Do you really think you'll learn something new up there?
Well, I'm sure not learning anything standing around here.
Damn.
In that case, we'll go with you.
Oh, hey, wait. Is Stratus Valkanus still okay? Because, you know, all these crazy monsters are appearing near Valkanus.
At the very least, the President deserves to know. But that means a side trip to Strata.
I'll go. But I'm not looking forward to it. Something wrong, Hubert? No, it's nothing. How about we go with you? It'll be a lot easier than going alone. All right, but please try not to cause any trouble.
Great face. Big sister type. Poisson says she counts on Pascal all the time. Why she says this, however, is a mystery. So again, notice, just to reiterate the old point, the first title that she got in Act 4, which was very discreetly about her and only her, not in relation to anyone else, but just Pascal is Pascal. No Excel ability attached to that. And now this relational one, identifying her as a big sister after that dialogue she had with Fourier and Poisson. Now she has that Excel title, not based on herself per se, but rather on herself in conversation and dialogue with others supporting each other. I am glad that you sent that message, Grail, because I was quietly worrying that I was the only one confused by that. Because I think a lot of it was kind of telegraphed in the end game of Act 3 in ways that did not feel perfectly clear to me. But I also wasn't sure if maybe I just missed or didn't absorb things just because I had the guys, Matt and Dan, hanging out too, so there was a lot to juggle. But yeah, I don't feel like that was perfectly explained in terms of the relationship between the cores, because we got that line with Pascal speculating that, oh yeah, they took this Listalia thing from their world and put it over here to try to solve their problems. But yeah, I'm hoping when we go back to Fodra now, we'll get some more explanation for exactly what it was that happened in the past, because I kind of read it at the time, and this feels very Tales to me, of the game basically giving you enough details into the past for you to understand the thematically relevant motivations of the characters and what the stakes are in that sense, without going further into the history than that. But if there are new entities waking up on Fodra, maybe the entity Sophie saw at the beginning of Act 4, then maybe there'll also be more motivation within the story to explain more of the details of what happened in the past beyond just what happened with Lambda. Because that was really the heart of the explanations we were getting at the end of Act 3, as I remember. It was like, yeah, you're learning a little bit about the relationship between Affinia and Fodra, but really only as a vehicle to understanding how Lambda came to be how he is.
Aw, you look down, little bro. What's wrong?
Me? No, nothing's wrong. Leave me alone.
Jeez, fine. Sorry. No need to be so cold. Gosh. You are being mean to Pascal, Hubert.
No, Wait, am I? But that's how I've always acted.
You never look her in the eyes.
Sophie, you are very perceptive. It's just, looking at her like that is difficult. It's hard for me to explain.
I love her.
I don't think I can meet her gaze at this particular moment.
Do you have a guilty conscience?
Huh? You've been talking to the captain, haven't you?
When a man has a guilty conscience, he can't look a woman in the eye, right?
Perhaps not. Not that I feel particularly guilty about anything, mind you. I hate to admit it, but sometimes even I don't understand what's wrong with me.
It's okay. Cheer up, Hubert.
Oh. Yeah, you're a mess, dude, but it's alright. The mutations took place near the Valkanus. That must be where the monsters' nests are. You have my deepest gratitude for rescuing Pascal. Thank you. Aw, Poisson. I'm glad we got to see more of her. All of these Amarcians, such great characters. Could really do a whole little study just on the Enclave. So here's a question, and Grail, you can help me out with your extended Tales knowledge. I feel like this idea of monsters evolving to deal with humans is a really cool and interesting one, and it's one that I can't really think of coming up in other entries in the series off the top of my head. Like, there's the idea in Arise of when the Zeugles become wild and stop listening to the Renans, but that's not quite the same thing. It's not like they're evolving, it's just that they were being controlled and now they're not anymore.
Sophie?
But like I said, I might just be forgetting other examples. I'm interested to see where they go with it, put it that way.
If you have something to say, you shouldn't keep it inside.
Yeah, that is a great line.
I want to be human. human. Your body's just a little different is all. No, it's more than that. I'm not like you at all. Asbel, Sharia, Hubert, Richard, Pascal, Captain Malik, you're all going to die someday. But not me.
Oh man, is it just Bicentennial Man with a bunch of extra steps?
Leave me behind when you died. Help me, Asbel. How do I become human?
Well,
I see. It's impossible, isn't it?
The scene is so perfectly directed.
I'm not even capable of tears. No matter how sad I get, I can't even cry like
It's
you.
a chilling echo of that moment with Colette and Symphonia.
I just want to be the same as you. I wish that Asbel was my father and Sharia was my mother. I wish I'd been born human with you as my family. Sophie.
Asbel, I'm not sure it's a good idea to bring her with us.
It's okay. I'll stay behind, here with Sophie. I just don't think she should travel until she's feeling a little better. I'll stay here too. I'm totally good at cheering people up.
And you, Asbel?
Press X to doubt.
It might help to come along and clear your head for a bit.
all right. I'll go to Strata.
Well, it looks like it's just the men this time.
Sharia, take care of Sophie, okay?
Remember that the anchor line of that song, the game's theme that was playing in that beautiful piano rendition, is "I wish that our hearts could be one," which is a great way for making sense of what it is that Sophie is struggling with. Yeah, I loved everything about that scene. That was really quite devastating. And the timing, too, I think the timing of that is really interesting. Just looking for Malik's Excel title. The oldest in a party consisting of 4 men. He lightens the mood with his ebullient humor. It's a great word. And again, relational and supportive. So that's certainly a theme here. Well, that's good. As a human who can cry, I'm gonna take you up on that offer because I definitely need the tear drying break before we move on. So let's head to you, Liberte, next. Yeah, what I was saying about the timing, like, I think it's really telling that she is finally willing to voice this deep-seated desire that she evidently has right after she's kind of seen Lambda like becoming more active within Asbel. And I think, yeah, she's wrestling with death, but there has to be something also that's like very painful and complex for Sophie, seeing this villain who had done so much wrong to the world now having a chance at redemption and becoming more humanized than she can be because he's actually occupying this human host and learning what it's like to be human in a way that Sophie can't. And how sad too, like, talk about just a pithy, poetic, devastating moment in a game, to have a character who is human enough to recognize that she's not human and to wish to be human in a way that she can't be. Like, you're aware enough to understand what true awareness is and that you cannot reach it. like in the spiritual sense, since this is also such a spiritually grounded game, right? Understanding the concept of enlightenment while also realizing how far away you are from it and not seeing a path to actually reaching that point. That's just so devastating. It is really nice, and I think one of the small comforts we have is like how gracious the game was to give us that scene of Sophie grown up at the conclusion of the end credits to Act 3, so we can at least like have some modest confidence that there's a happy ending, because otherwise I'd be feeling pretty beaten down right now, man. I'll tell you that. Yeah, I would agree with you, Grail. I think definitely it's something that has been brewing for a while. I think what I meant in terms of the timing was I think seeing the model of Lambda becoming humanized within Asbel like makes her more aware of what she's probably been feeling a long time, and gives her the ability to voice it in a way that she hasn't in the past. Because you're right, it's like it's a version of the hierarchy of needs, you know, where just as the main story was concerned with Lambda rather than the broader history of the world, so too was Sophie in it, concerned with understanding what her duty was and what it took to either fulfill that duty or let that duty go. And it's really not until you're brought into this context with friends who give you the freedom to be who you are that you can think more holistically about what you are and what it is to be you, whether that's to be a person or to be something other than a person, right? So I think in that sense it's logical that she had to overcome everything that she did in the base game before she could now raise and struggle with this question. There's an interesting sense, and like I wonder how much the game will delve into this, because if you think about like the rational decision making of humans, one line of philosophical thought you can go down is to say like people are able to exert free will and make decisions and build these life projects and give them meaning because their lives are finite and they know that they're going to end. And so they can take these actions not just as random chaotic things that happen in the world, but rather as elements that build a life narrative that constitute them going from the beginning of their life to the end, and give at the end of life, if things go well, a sense of closure to that story that was told through the life. And so Sophie, you know, stepping beyond her duty to think about what she is, might now be wrestling with not something that's totally distinct from the question of what her duties are, but rather understanding like if I'm not a thing that can die, then there's a deep sense in which I'm not free, because I can't really decide what meaning to make out of my life. I'm just this kind of input output machine that is able to like for some amount of time or duration like enact the duty that's imposed on me by something else, like Emerald, you know, giving her the directive of destroying Lambda. But I can never really build life projects because my life is not the kind of thing that can be defined by a narrative. It has no closure to it. Really interesting way to unwind the question of duty into the question of narrative and storytelling that so many JRPGs, but especially the Tales games, are deeply concerned with. Ha, your fourth favorite skit. All right, here we go. Buckle up.
A city of water and sun. Such beauty is the pride.
She's trying though. That's the sad thing. She's trying. She just can't quite reach it.
No matter how often I come here, I can't help but gasp at its splendor. It's like a jewel box has been upended on the sand.
A jewel box? Anyway, Verona is nothing to sneeze at either.
Ah, indeed. The ancient castles and historic neighborhoods are as pieces of a shimmering jewel box that conveys our rich history.
Another jewel box?
Zavhert may be lacking in traditional beauty, but neither city can match its sheer majesty.
Is it a jewel box?
Perhaps it is so. Zavhert is built from hard labor and workmanlike skill. A veritable jewel box boasting the artistry and craftsmanship of her designers.
Enough with the jewel box!
Asbel?
Did I say that out loud?
It's Lambda's influence. I can't resist the urge to tell Richard how stupid he sounds. Learn more figurative language. I wore the swimsuit so I could save people from drowning. But I can't even find someone choking on a glass of water. So here, you should have it. Recovered Malik's swimsuit. Alright. That's right, we never finished the swimsuit collection post-game in Act 3. But clearly we can still go back to it. I feel that skit deeply because especially on the stream in real time, I will like sometimes feel the way that I imagine Richard was feeling. We're like, yeah, I wanna come up with a new comparison, but I can't think of any new words for it. So I just have to recycle the old words. Sometimes that's useful for keeping a tightly locked down vocabulary of the precise terms that you want to analyze, because you introduce too many synonyms and the track of the analysis can become confusing and hard to make sense of. But sometimes it's like, there are more concepts you want to work with, but how do you pull it out of the air into your head and then out of your mouth? This game is a veritable jewel box, Grail. Indeed. Skid in the next room. Okay. Ah, there we go. Catching up with the Oswells.
It's been half a year since I visited Strata. There was a lot going on back then. But this time, I'll make sure to visit your family and introduce myself. As your brother.
You don't need to do that.
Sure I do. Is everyone doing well?
Oh, the same as always, I suppose. My father is a bit meeker from all his political struggles.
That whole rebellion thing that he tried. Fomenting insurrection. We don't really talk about it.
Is Raymond doing the same sorts of things that you are?
I wouldn't say that, but he's actually... well, he's following Sharia.
Following Sharia?
What?
What do you mean?
Well, I suppose it's a little more complicated than that. Probably. He raises money to support Sharia's relief organization. And sometimes he visits their operations sites as an inspector.
I can't believe that. He's a great guy to care so much.
You don't? I'm just going to let this go.
Why, he's just a morally commendable individual we should all seek to emulate in all aspects of our lives. Oh, I wonder, I think the Oswell residence is back one, right? I wanted to go there next. Based on the skit. He's trying to figure out how to save the world from the other world. He's trying to figure out how to morally educate it, the alien living inside him. He's got a lot going on. Oh, talk to El Presidente first? All right. You fool, Dylan. I'd have solved this problem by now. That seems to reinforce what you were saying, Grail. Alright. Well, we can see this little side bit through, and then I suppose we can wrap up for the evening. Just want to go and go since we've been gone for so long, but now we're going to be back in a regular rhythm, so that'll rectify itself before we know it. Yeah, you'll be sick of me before you can blink an eye. Don't tempt me, I'll do it. Throwback to the Beyond the Dawn streams. Oh my goodness. I truly thought that last one was never going to end. In the best of ways. I loved it for that. Think back fondly on it.
This is starting to get out of hand.
I couldn't do anything for her. I didn't know what to say.
Few people would. It's a difficult problem with no one simple solution. Right now, you need to attend to business. You can make time for Sophie later.
You're right. Of course. So, Hubert, will we see the president soon? Hubert?
Oh, yes, of course.
Worried about the president's daughter, are you?
Captain,
Wait, what?
it's nothing. It's just a little marriage proposal.
Oh, is that all?
I never thought I'd hear the words Hubert and marriage in the same conversation.
Wow.
You're one to talk. Mother had plenty to say about you in her letters, you know.
Don't you two have anything better to do than discuss my personal life?
Absolutely not.
Don't look at me. Your marriage is all she can think about anymore.
It is a sign of great trust for the president to offer you his daughter's hand.
I know, and that's what makes it so awkward. If you hadn't sent that request for aid, I don't know what I'd be doing now.
Right.
If you're this worried, Hubert, maybe we shouldn't go on.
I'm not worried, it's just I don't know how to approach the president because I have no intention of accepting the proposal.
The president is reasonable. If you speak with him man to man, I'm sure he'll understand.
Evie does not like the idea of Hubert declining this proposal. The contrarian! His hesitation to act is an example of weakness in an otherwise generally strong man. Well, that's interesting. So that kind of does count Hubert as the odd one out. So his title is more about a refusal to act than supporting others. But I feel like that's kind of consonant with Hubert's personality. Like he supports by being decisive and oftentimes like being the guardrails for other people and insisting that they do something that they maybe don't want to do for their own good or the good of others. She's still working out of her system all the things that she wanted to say to me but had no recourse to for the past 2.5 weeks. But I'm a happy dog dad. She was ecstatic the minute I came through the door, and she like lost her mind with happiness to see Dan and me again. So I was kind of worried she would immediately just shun me and be bitter that I left her for a while, but it was the total opposite of that. And I might have said this already, but we spent all of yesterday when I was recovering from jet lag just napping together on the couch, which was fabulous.
So, how is your foster father doing these days, Hubert?
Well, he spent quite a bit of time moping around the house.
Was he sick?
No, it's from when the president discovered his plan to take over Lant. You can imagine the repercussions he had to face as a direct result. I won't lie, those were tough times. But now my father and the president seem to be getting along far better than they were before.
So, all the talk about you marrying the president's daughter stems from that?
Yes, that may be the case.
Regardless, treasure the time you have left with your father. You don't know how long his health will hold, and I'm sure he still has things to teach you.
There isn't much I care to hear from that particular father.
The more I see of men like you, the less I want a son of my own.
Does that mean you want a daughter, Captain Malik?
Well, I suppose I wouldn't mind an adorable little girl.
Adorable, sure. Until she grows up and calls you a pig, and tells you to stay out of her life forever.
Jesus.
Does it bring you joy to crush my dreams?
Oh, please,
Lots.
Captain. I'm only being realistic. Whether he's right or not, I do have things to report. I suppose a quick family visit wouldn't hurt?
Maybe that triggers talking to his foster dad. Yeah, this is interesting to me too, thinking about the different stages of development of the characters, because I feel like maybe this is biased perception, but I kind of feel like this fourth act is a little bit more Malik forward. Like he seems to be, okay, fine, I'll do the president first. That's very misleading though from the context of that skit, because he said, yeah, maybe I should pay him a visit. But I lost my train of thought. Yeah, so I might be being biased, but I feel like Malik seems to be taking a much more active role in kind of guiding the development of especially the young male characters in this fourth act versus how we saw him conducting himself in the first 3 acts of the game, where, like we talked about quite a bit, he was largely keeping to himself and thinking through and working on his own history and issues and how to come to terms with his past and who he wanted to be. And I think that's interesting and kind of complementary to what we were saying about the different stages of Sophie's development. This idea that in large part, the main game of Graces, acts 1 through 3, was concerned with just how characters come to understand themselves and their relationships with one another, and in large part thinking about just the character's place in the present and who they are and what their relationships are like now versus what they were like and what they had to deal with in their past. And it's only now that we're into this future arc when there's been a further evolution of time, but also bringing the characters to a point where they're thinking about further progressions in time, like their further future, you know, if they want to be married, if they want to have children, what kind of leaders they want to grow into, that now it makes sense for a character like Malik to step back in a sense, but kind of laterally into the role of teacher, because we saw him initially as Asbel's teacher in the Knights. Now he's kind of much more holistically a mentor, like this much older guy, 40, maybe 41 now, not sure when his birthday is, who has the life experience to be able to guide these younger men who are now thinking about what kind of men they want to grow up to be in making decisions like, does it make sense to marry? How do I maintain relationships with my family over time? It's really cool, especially as such a Malik fan, to see him growing into that role at the moment when it makes sense for him to in the context of the story. Yeah, but I mean, I'm so glad for this fourth act, put a little differently, Grail, for that reason, because like I'd like Richard and Malik, I would say, are 2 of those characters where like I find them really interesting and I like them, and so I get the sense of wanting to see more of them in the story. But I also I respect everything that the story says by keeping them out of the narrative and saying like, all right, here are the things we want you to think about based on how Richard has gone from being such a compelling member of the party to being an antagonist who has pushed everyone away. Or here's what we want to think about. Here's what we want you thinking about in terms of the way Malik has gone from being this teacher to retreating inward and working through his issues on his own before coming back to the party. So like, I oftentimes feel like, and I was actually talking about this with Dan a little bit in Japan, like there's this sense in which we can fall in love with characters so much in games and stories more broadly that we want to see as much of them as possible. And that's great to resonate with characters, but I think oftentimes like people will then jump to the conclusion that a game has failed in some way if it doesn't like dedicate as much time as possible to every interesting character, when sometimes, like especially in a Tales game, and this is actually part of what I'm going to be talking about in my Tales of Fantasia study that I'm going to be working on next, like the game says so much by the absence of characters under certain circumstances. But all that said, like I said, I fully self-identify as mega fan of Malik, so I'm glad that the story has continued to a point where it makes sense to have him much more in the foreground as we're seeing now. No, for sure. And I totally wasn't, trying to call you out as one of those people, Grail. I know you better than that, bro. But I think it's worth mentioning because you and I both know there are many people in the Tales community who do feel that way about characters. And I think like it's all well and good to feel that way and have those feelings about characters, but you can also oftentimes discover so many new cool dimensions in the story that these games are trying to tell by thinking about why the characters are used and represented in the ways that they are, especially when they are left out of key parts of the story.
Hubert, Lord Asbel. My goodness, King Richard.
What's going on? Did something happen?
We've received word that the Valkanus is under attack.
Damn! I didn't think the monsters would get here so quickly.
Do you know something? We can explain everything later. Right now, we need your permission to attack these creatures.
King Richard, I couldn't possibly ask that of you.
Please, I insist. My kingdom owes a great debt to the courage of Strata.
And there was that time I just kind of up and appeared and sucked all the energy out of your Valkanus. So, like, I'm still trying to figure out how to say my bad for that.
I would do anything in my power to help you.
Additionally, sir, I fear our soldiers will be no match for these monsters.
How could you let that fact fall out of your head, Grail? That's one of the most fun parts about Strata. Voiced by good guy Alexei.
They acquired the power to combat them.
Very well. If things are as you say, I will leave these beasts in your capable hands.
Thank you, Mr. President. We won't disappoint you.
The Eradication Commander. Even the king cannot ignore the threat posed by Nova monsters. He leads the fight in person, supporting the rest of humanity against the creatures that were seemingly spawned by Lambda, though it's less clear now. Definitely some level of support and leadership in there, though. Shooting stars. Truly one of the best OGs. I know I can rely on you, Hubert. Take the west exit. Yeah, okay, we know that. Oh, but he knew we knew that. It's a fine castle.
Welcome back, Hubert. How are things progressing?
He has a great kit, there's no doubt about that. And really cool to think about him repurposing all of those kind of pain and darkness oriented spells now that he has a different grip on himself. But yeah, nothing to dislike about Shooting Stars. It's a classic. You know what's interesting too? I don't think this is my memory playing tricks on me, but like all of these side quests seem to be voiced, whereas the voiced side quests in the main game were pretty rare. Most of them were not voiced, even after we fixed the audio issue that we had early on in the stream. So it's interesting to see that difference in representation as well.
We have obstacles, but none that cannot be overcome.
Good, good. But now we have another matter to discuss.
The gaslighting never ends.
As a player in Strata's political machine,
You're gonna still be gaslighting me about that like 3 games from now, aren't you, bro?
the President and I had our differences, yes, but that's all behind us now. I am counting on you, Hubert. Do not fail me.
He's talking about marriage, isn't he?
I fear he will be disappointed. I have no interest in marrying the President's daughter.
Then you'd best refuse him quickly.
I don't get it, Hubert. Why are you so against the idea?
Milord Pascal.
I'm sure he has a reason. In situations such as these, you must be both clear and firm. To do anything else would invite disaster.
I am aware of that, Captain. It's just...
I understand. It must be hard to have a true love who is so... you know.
Pascal, let's make out.
True love? What are you talking about?
Oh, come now. There's no point in denying it.
Great music change.
We all know, after all.
What?
I'm really confused right now.
Everyone except Asbel.
Don't worry about it, Asbel.
But if you want to refuse the president, you're going to need a good reason.
Hubert is still young. Perhaps he can claim he's not ready for the responsibility of a family.
Yes, but married life changes reality for everyone. I don't see why that would be any different for me.
What if you said you didn't want to marry until your military position was more secure?
I'm already a lieutenant.
Bah, titles are meaningless.
Oh, what a game to say that in.
If I wished it, I could have thousands of troops at my command.
All right, fine. Then tell him ladies at every port of call have fallen for your good looks.
That's a terrible idea. I want to avoid a marriage, not lose the respect of the people.
I'm starting to think you don't want to avoid this marriage at all.
Well, not with these awful ideas, I don't.
Oh, this is madness. Just tell him you're in love with someone else already.
And if people ask who it is?
Then tell them her name.
Oh, yes.
Be a fucking man, guy.
And who would honestly believe I carried a torch for her?
Literally everyone except your brother.
I think you just admitted it.
Now see here! Holy crap!
I think your brother has finally figured it out. What do you think, Asbel?
He thinks he's in love with Sophie or someone, right?
Hubert's in love with... Enough. We are done talking about this. Now then. I have no plans to marry the president's daughter.
If she'd even have you.
After all, I have little interest in the political ambitions of my father. If I am to support this country in the future, I must maintain my connection to the common people, just as I know she will.
Legion Commander. Oh, Hubert. Also, I want to go back and fight with Dan at some point about that symbol on the back of Hubert's coat because, like, I know he said he didn't see it, but he also admitted he had not played the whole game. And, like, he said that, and then I swear to God, guys, we went to Japan and we saw, like, a circle divided 8 ways indicated as representing the Eightfold Path of Buddhism on so many bodhisattvas and different Buddhist figures at the so many different temples that we visited. So I'm still carrying that torch. I'm not ready to put that down, not even close. You don't believe I have that many troops? Well, too bad. I won't show my trump card so easily. I love it. Alright, well, we can go to that one after he's gotten this title sorted. Alright. Do we have a place to save? I reckon that's a good piece of side content on which to dwell and wrap up before we save the day for the Stratton Valkanus. That was fun, and I had so missed it. Long overdue, but so nice to be back. And you'll get many more tales of Japan in the coming days, and many more adventures to be had in Graces and beyond, no doubt about that. And nice that we've already set our tentative plan so that it's a bit less of a question mark. Oh, I guess the inn is the closest save point. We hadn't been to you, Liberte and Asbel. Yeah, I guess my teaser to end on. I'm sure this will come up at one point or another, but I want to wait to the right point until I tell the story. But when I was nodding to a lot of the cultural things that I thought about when I went over to Japan as influencing Tales of Graces that I hadn't really considered before, even though I had been over to Japan before, I had never gotten the chance to go in any of the hot springs or public baths. And we did that quite a bit this time, which was great. It was just one of the most relaxing and centering experiences I've ever had. Like, my body already misses that. But I'll tell you, even just going into the first one of those and thinking about the gender dynamics and the place it has in the broader culture, got me to think about the storytelling of Hot Springs in the Tales series in some pretty different ways, in ways that were rewardingly resonant with the other themes of the games, in a way that made them into much more than just like a little joke post-game piece of content that recurs throughout the games. So we can talk more about that at some point. But for now, my dear friends, Grail, my mainstay, my beloved, great to see you, my friend. Pottery Breaking, you are also beloved. I know you just had to go early, but it was great seeing you back. Anyone else who was lurking? Random Child, that's your username, right? I'm sorry, you're still relatively new. I know you came over from Dan's, but it was great seeing you too. I hope you enjoyed yourself. I hope that you come back. And friends, if you're new to the series, if you're just discovering us, or if you're finding your way back after the break, we are back now. We'll be working through the end of this wonderful F arc of Tales of Graces, with everything from meaning of death to meaning of humanity to meaning of mentorship all came up in this stream and well beyond. And now we have, I think, pretty definitively settled, and we can make some nice formal announcement about it at some point, that next up will be Zillia and Zillia 2, so plenty to look forward to. I know, especially for you, Grail. No, it's not like anyone missed this. Why did we come back to this? Because we must. Because it is our destiny. The destiny that we choose in the way that only Tales could teach us, to elect to do something for which we were fated. I know. Don't threaten me with a good time either. You know I'll crank out something with even more words that is even sillier than that and try to convince you that it is everything but silly. Oh, yes, but friends, I'm giddy. We have good live book clubs coming up with the Real Life JRPG Party, and I've got plenty of writing juices and analytical juices gestating, marinating. I don't know what the least gross metaphor is to go with, but plenty of gears turning on the written work now that those grad apps are done and dusted. So we're going to be going into a good year of celebrating and thinking really hard about the magic of video game storytelling, gearing up for that 10-year anniversary of With the Terrible Fate in November. Oh, how fortunate am I to keep the company of gamers such as you. Thank you, everyone. Grail, especially to you. Always great keeping company with you, and appreciate you staying the whole way. We'll be back same time, 7 p.m. Eastern on Friday, and back into our normal rhythm after that. Onward. All right, my dear friends, I hope you think well. I hope you game well. Look forward to more Japan stories, tales from the cultural to the mystical to the pop cultural, as well as plenty more game analysis of the Tales series and beyond. Until then, I'll see you next time. Be good. I'm Aaron Suduko, the founder of With the Terrible Fate. This has been Tales of Praxis. Cheers, my friends.